happened to our background music? We need a little background music. Okay.
Make a request.
I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:03. And I'm going to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement, that we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Salix, and the Sinixt peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and the rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. So first, I'd like to see if there is any late items from the table. Seeing none, I'd like to move for adoption of the agenda. Councillor Anderson, Councillor Lautenberg, all those in favor? Passed. And can I get a motion to adopt the minutes? Councillor Anderson, all those in favor? So to start with, we're going to have a public participation component to the meeting. And
excuse me, Mr. Chair. Were we going to have a moment of silence?
Might be premature.
Okay.
I talked to John about it.
Okay, thank you.
I think we do want to acknowledge, though, as council, the tragic events of last Thursday and the officer that is currently in hospital fighting for his life, and the effect that's had on our community and our service personnel and the wider province. So we do want to acknowledge that, and we send our thoughts and prayers to his family and himself during this trying time. So we're going to have an opportunity for public participation. We're going to limit the discussion to 15 minutes. Is anyone in the gallery wishing to speak to council at this time? I see two hands. Brenton, you know the majority of the spiel, and I don't have it in front of me at the moment. 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes, Brenton. You're first.
Thank you. I noticed participating
And can
through
we just-
teleconferencing that it's important to speak into the microphone, otherwise the public doesn't hear you.
Thank you. Can we just get your name and
Sure.
city?
Brenton Raby, 512 Hendrick Street. Thank you all for allowing me to appear. Regarding delegation requests to Council of the Whole, I see that this comes up also in the presentation from staff today. Council of the Whole delegations limited to 3 at the discretion of the staff is not the transparency, the accountability, nor the ability of this council to process information that was promised. I was told in early June that council was struggling with a backlog of delegations. I see no such backlog. I do not see council being overworked. Permitting staff to limit participation in and the information that you receive from delegations to me is not really acceptable, and it doesn't seem necessary. The lack of public participation through the delegation process in major bylaw changes limits your ability to consider all information, and for inaccurate information from previous delegations to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, I don't know your name, but I saw another hand up here, so you can make your way to the front. And again, we'll just ask for your name and
You betcha.
home address.
You betcha.
Not the address, but city of residence.
Oh, that's okay. I'm Ryland Kewen. I live in Nelson, right at the epicenter of the beautiful dust storm we call Cherry Street, on the 1200 block of Cherry Street, or whatever it is, 1000 block of Cherry Street. First off, I don't think anybody needs to, nobody in our neighborhood thinks that the city crews or anybody in the city is specifically being negligent on purpose and no hard feelings, but I'm going to just read a letter that we essentially sent to Colin Innes a couple weeks ago, and it's been a little edited. Anyways, as one of the residents of Observatory and Cherry Street, I'm here because there's 4 houses that border that. I'm sure you're aware of the condition of the street and the never-ending dust clouds that are up there. We're rather upset with it, and the solution that's been presented after calling all last year to get dust suppressants applied, which happened in the 3rd week of August last year. That was the first meaningful thing anyways, and then this year we tried to avoid that. We started in April again. Still, there has been no dust suppressant applied. We think that really the road, given its usage being more of a collector roadway than a residential access only roadway, it can't be at that standard. The local improvement bylaw, we're literally choking on dust basically. It's difficult for taxpaying residents to live like this. I'm not wearing the mask because of the dust. I got a person at home with really low immunity right now. But we can't enjoy our yards. We live in this constant cloud. The inside of our homes are covered with dust if we open the windows during the day. It's a direct result of the constant stream of traffic going up and down Cherry Street. RDCK numbers that I've heard are somewhere around 90,000. Okay, I better read fast. And now it's compounded by all the work going on up there, which is well needed and good. Most important thing to understand is that this is not a road used by residents primarily of the neighborhood. It's a collector roadway. The street's used by the community above Mountain Station, City Works vehicles, tourists, mountain bikers, all of the recreation people. Perhaps it would be prudent to charge a toll if we can't afford to maintain it somehow. Anyways, I'm saying that sarcastically, but the local improvement bylaw expects me, who never even drives on it, my address is on Observatory, to pay a part of 35% of a $100,000 job. It's a paved road, actually. It was coated in regrind or reclaim in about 2008 before the logging was done. And that surface did deteriorate, but it got covered in dump truck loads of dirt. And it should have been patched, in my opinion, because that's what the paving bylaw is for. This is a problem created by the City of Nelson's neglect of it over years and just doing the dirt thing. Anyways, we had a conversation with Craig, who said he was going to do something better this year and acknowledged the lack of service on that. He doesn't work there anymore. We keep calling and we don't get callbacks. I've talked to Brittany. She's been very understanding. Sarah's been very understanding, and even both of them acknowledged that there's got to be something between sign the bylaw or get zero maintenance. Because that's what's been going on, truthfully. So I guess I better wrap it up. I don't think you guys would want your family or grandparents or kids like I have breathing that every day. I have to run a sprinkler all day so I don't get buried in dust, and it's starting to make some people get mad. Most people thank me for it, but I think it's a waste of water, honestly. And anyways, I understand how the local improvement bylaw makes sense. New developments, the subdivision development bylaw. I don't want to pay for a new developments road, but that road's one of the oldest roads in town. It used to service the BNR, which brought people in from Spokane. So anyways, the process of us having to agree to pay is been, it's either we do that or nothing happens. Anyways, it's an incredibly busy street. I've counted probably 300 to 400 cars a day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this discussion is ongoing,
Yes.
even still at City Hall.
And I've heard that from Sarah today as well, that there's actually, but that's the thing is all last year I didn't get one call back. I called every 2 weeks to Public Works, left my name and number. I didn't receive one acknowledgement even. And that was sort of, it just seems like the Bermuda Triangle of maintenance. Like there's things going on above and below, but there it's not good for anybody.
No, it isn't.
And if you guys
But-
need to see videos of that so you can like justify it or make an amendment or
In
something.
the interest of fairness, just to thank you
Yeah.
for letting us know and hear from that again.
Yeah.
And do know that the conversations are ongoing in City Hall.
And I appreciate that.
We appreciate you taking the time to
Yes,
participate.
and thank you
Thanks,
for
Ryan.
hearing me, and I hope we can make it work for everybody.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Do I see anyone else? Yes. So 3 minutes and just name and where you reside.
My name is Linda Rundle. I reside in Rosemont. I am here tonight to talk about the assault of the Abbotsford police officer that happened in the 600 block of Baker Street the other day. On CBC radio tonight, they stated that the victim is on life support and is not expected to live. This is a grave event that will have a lasting stain on our community that used to have a reputation as a safe place to live and visit. I'm sorry. Last year, a woman was randomly attacked while walking down Baker Street in the afternoon and was stabbed multiple times in the neck. 2 years ago, another man was killed in a fight outside on the 600 block Baker Street as well. Since the public washroom facilities were installed on the Hall Street Baker Street corner, I have watched a vagrant population take over this corner as their hangout. Before the toilet was installed, there was hardly ever a problem in this area. Over the past couple of years, and more recently, the gathering of people sitting on the sidewalks have created a complete blockage of the sidewalk to the point where passers-by have to walk out onto the street to get around the bikes, bags, dogs, and people who have decided to take over this area. There is smoking of cannabis, drinking of alcohol, the trade of drugs, and very little has been done to address this issue. It is getting worse by the week. Many people have complained that they do not feel safe in this vicinity. Even able-bodied young men who I know have told me that they feel unsafe walking through this area. I have heard many Nelsonites avoid coming downtown altogether because of this situation. What kind of small town community do we have when residents don't feel safe walking on our downtown area in broad daylight? This problem has been growing over the years and has not been addressed with any lasting results. It is a huge elephant in the room that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed now. The time is now to make some decisive actions to restore the safety and security of our beloved little town. The last council and mayor had a plan to create a bylaw that would not allow sitting on the sidewalk. No one sits on sidewalks except for this group of people. The bylaw would not put anyone else out and would make sure the passage was allowed without fear. Please don't look away any longer. Something must be done, or we will see more innocent people seriously injured or killed. You mostly all know me. I have a business in the 600 block Baker Street, and this is very frightening. And next time, it may be someone we know, a family member, me, or you. Please do something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to participate in the public component of the meeting? With that, I will move on to our presentation section. I'd like to invite Jesse Pineiro. Earlier this year, Jesse Pineiro of the Nelson Boxing Club was named Coach of the Year by BC Boxing and was also named Head Coach of Team BC. At the 2020 Boxing PDC Provincial Championships in Richmond in February, Nelson boxers coached by Jesse won an astounding 5 medals. Jesse is the founder and owner of the Nelson Boxing Club, and behind his management, leadership, and coaching, the club has made itself known throughout the province as a boxing powerhouse. Beyond the club's competitive achievements and successes, the club provides a safe, fun, and supportive environment for athletes in the West Kootenay to develop their boxing skills while learning about fair play, discipline, and sportsmanship. The city recognizes Jesse for his numerous achievements and thanks him for his valuable contribution to our community. And Jesse, would you come and receive this plaque? Say a few words?
I'm gonna get the photo.
Heck you want. Thank you. Nobody's gonna argue with you, believe me. No, it means a lot, and I'm happy to do it, and hope we can
Keep up the good work, Jesse.
Great job.
Down there for the Tuesday night ladies boxing.
I'm just gonna get shit kicked out of me.
I want to go and try it.
Yeah. Can you do it in October?
Thank you so much to Jesse and his work with the young men in our community, young men and women in our community. Next on our agenda is a cultural presentation by musician Lucas Burrows. And just give me a sec here so I can get to our... Lucas Burrows is a recent graduate from MacEwan University's Jazz and Contemporary Music program in composition. And he is a multi-instrumental composer with a keen interest in all genres of music. In 2019, Lucas won the Edmonton Composers Competition with his orchestral composition Waltz for Kira, and he has had pieces performed by many ensembles. For the July 20 cultural presentations, Lucas will perform a piece, and he was already gracing us with a little bit of atmospheric music at the start of this meeting. So
You might want to get closer to the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so move the black chair if you want to sit in the low chair.
Okay.
Move it out of the way so that you're... Thank you, so we can all hear it.
Are you joined by Kira?
No, it's something else today. So I wasn't sure what kind of cultural enrichment you guys were looking for when I was asked to do this, but as a composer, it's my job, if I'm writing in a specific style of music, to learn that style, listen to all these different styles of music, and practice writing. And I thought, I should do some personal cultural enrichment for myself. And my mom is from Switzerland, and I asked her if she had any folk songs that she knew from her home. And she's like, oh yeah, I got one. This is great. So this is the oldest folk song in Switzerland. It's called Gukisberglied. I've learned it in the last week. We'll see how it goes. But it's in Swiss German. It's the story of Frena, the farm girl who's in love, a forbidden love with Simon Hans Jockeli on the other side of the mountain. And what else? The first verse was written in 1541. And the completed version was finished, that's still sung today, in 1736. And I sang it to my grandparents on the phone just a couple days ago, and they're like, wow, I sang that in school. It's amazing, so they know it. This is Gukisberglied. Ich hab in a Menjo Farte, Simmerliberg, uns Vreneli ab im Gukisberg und Simes Hans Jockeli an dem Berg. Sie haben a Menjo Farte, dass ich mich bin im See. Unter in der Tiefe, Simmerliberg, det unter in der Tiefe, Simmerliberg, uns Vreneli ab im Gukisberg und Simes Hans Jockeli an dem Berg, det unter in der Tiefe, da steht es Mühlrad. Das malet nu das Liebe, Simmerliberg. Das malet nu das Liebe, Simmerliberg, uns Vreneli ab im Gukisberg und Simes Hans Jockeli an dem Berg. Das mollet nüt aus Lieb i dir Nacht und auch dir Tag. So those are three verses of I think like 9 or 10, but the first verse is there's no one else in the world with whom I would rather be with, and then there's the refrain, Frena from Kukisberg and Simon on the other side of the mountain. And then the next verse is down in the gorge there is a mill, and then the refrain, and then the last verse is what was it? Give me a sec. The mill grinds nothing but our love through the day and the night.
Wow.
That's my mom's favorite verse. I had to sing it.
My German bones. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. That was beautiful.
Lovely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
question away, Councillor Renwick.
How can I listen to Waltz for Kira? I'm
Yeah.
just so you know, I used to be Kira's neighbor. She used to sell me Girl Guide cookies.
Oh, no way.
A lot of Girl Guide cookies, actually. That's why I look the way I do today.
Well, I have a website. It's lucasburrows.com, and I think if you go under music, there's like a sample. That was
Oh,
recorded. I wrote on piano, so maybe I should have brought my piano. But
Well, you must be putting forward to present at the one-man show for the Capitol Theatre for their call-out.
I
Going
didn't
to-
even know
going-
that was
I think it's happening now. If anyone
Okay.
knows the dates, but they're definitely doing call-out for their fall, to the new rescheduled version of their fall schedule,
Okay.
which will be a lot of one-man shows.
Yeah, that's I guess how it goes right now. I can't put an orchestra together.
Yeah,
For the 9 verses then.
Yeah, exactly.
and we
I
can
have
hear the
time to
whole
learn it all.
Watts. Yeah. Lucas, thank you very much.
thank you, Lucas.
Yeah, that was lovely.
Take care.
I see that we have Ginger here to give us a presentation on the Foodcycler pilot program update.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys
Yeah.
can go.
Parents have a food cycler, those.
You can do
Thank you,
atmospheric music in the background. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so okay. Before we start, I just want to make sure we have Alex from Ottawa. He's should be on. I see somebody else on.
So we have a Foodcycler pilot program update with staff and hopefully Alex Heyman, a representative from Food Cycle Science, the company that manufactures the Foodcycler, and they are presenting the results and takeaways from the Foodcycler pilot program that took place over the course of the last 4 months. I think we're supposed to get another Foodcycler in there, just for good brand recognition.
I'm just, just one sec, I'm just gonna. He's not able to join, Sarah. I have not been able to join the call.
So I'm gonna give everyone a bit of the background where you guys sort some of that out.
Sounds good.
Council has a number of policy objectives that will be achieved by maximizing organic diversion from the waste stream. In April 2019, Council was presented with the Regional District's Organic Waste Diversion Strategy, which focused on curbside collection of organics. The RD requested that the city partner with them to implement the strategy. On May 6, 2019, Council did pass a resolution to partner with the RD subject to a number of conditions. At the same time, the conversation at the Council table involved consideration of alternative options for organic diversion. Notably, a second resolution passed by Council on May 6, 2019 was as follows. That Council explore the opportunity for residents to opt out of curbside recycling of organic waste on the condition that they participate in an approved alternate organic waste diversion strategy. In order to determine whether a product such as the Foodcycler might serve as a viable alternative to curbside collection of organics, the city facilitated a Foodcycler pilot program. The pilot program was made available to city staff and EcoSafe program registrants, ultimately 151 households, have been participating over the last 3 to 4 months. And magically, Alex will show up right at
He'll
the end
show
of
up.
that.
Okay, so I'll start. So yeah, you've done the intro there. Thank you, Councillor Page. So we were looking at options for, are we able to see? Do you all see it? I'm looking for.
Can you share on your? Sorry about this.
It's okay. We're just experiencing the normal technical difficulties that are just par for the course these days.
Business is good.
Business is good.
Well, I can speak a little bit while she's working on that.
Please.
So last year, as
Everybody has the presentation.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be nice for
Find that.
the public to see, but
Find it on the website right
That-
now, right? They can go to the agenda and find it on
There
the
That's
it is.
website.
right.
We have it now.
there we go. Okay, so last year, looking at options for diverting food waste, the idea of piloting a Foodcycler came up, and so the administration department here in our offices brought one in, and we used the Foodcycler for 1 year, and then the decision was made to expand the program to see how useful it could be and whether it could be utilized on a larger scale in Nelson homes. We had great success with it in our office, but that was just one unit in our experience, so we wanted to roll that out a little farther. In total, we brought in 150 units. Foodcycler sent us a couple extra along the way, so we had 151 participants. We opened it up to, is he on? Hello, Alex. Can you hear us?
Hello, I'm here now. Sorry for the technical delays.
I think that was our fault.
Thanks for
so
joining us, Alex.
Welcome. No? Oh, okay. Well, welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, so we're just at the beginning, talking about the actual program itself. Tonight, I'm going to be referring to City Manager Kevin Cormack and Alex from Foodcycler to answer more of the technical and statistical questions. We had an interesting start to the program because it happened all when COVID really took off. So where we had 160 people signed up because we had a little extra just to cover off, about 40 dropped off right when the pandemic hit for very logical reasons, finances. It was just a tense time, and just by referral from the group that we already had, we were able to fill the spots, no problem. So we did go out to the EcoSave registrants, the solar array participants, and city staff, and a few extras here and there. So 151 is what we ended up with. We asked everybody, in order to be part of the pilot program and receive the $125 rebate, that they would do an intake survey, monitor their usage for 3 months in April, May, and June, and then do an exit survey. So I won't go too much into that. The intake survey was pretty simple. We just wanted to see what people's commitment were to the pilot program and get a little bit of intake information. We did hold a workshop. Again, luckily the timing worked out. It was just before COVID was a bit more serious. We were able to still hold a workshop. We had 60 participants, and the goal of the workshop was to have demonstrations. We had live models, like you see here. We had them running, and we also showed people what the end product looked like. And in the big part was that we had Brad, who's the owner of Foodcycle Science, and Alex on a virtual monitor, and they answered questions for the whole evening for the group. About half of the participants already had a unit, so they were able to ask questions that they were already experienced or didn't quite understand. The other half still hadn't purchased yet because they were on the fence, and so by coming to the workshop, they all ended up purchasing, most of them that night. So it was a really engaged audience, and the whole pilot program, all of the participants from the beginning have been very engaged. This ended up being, I would qualify it as successful for the workshop. Just a few stats. I know you all have these in your package, but as you can see, a lot of the people in the program live in single detached homes, 86% of them. 50% composted their food waste prior to the program, and 50% either did not compost at all or only in the summer months. The top two reasons that showed up in our intake survey that people really were interested in the Foodcycler was our pest problem in Nelson. It was the overwhelming reason. People are nervous about the rats in the community. And also the other bit was the smell of their garbage between pickup days. So there's, if you look in your package, I've included the entire results of the survey, including all comments. Nothing was left out, so you can see what the community was saying. Halfway through the program, we actually hosted a thought exchange, and you can see the question is, what are your initial thoughts of the Foodcycler? How effective is it in reducing food waste going to the landfill? This was great. I mean, we already knew quite a bit what we were hearing from the group on our Facebook page, which I'll talk about, but the overwhelming message that we got from the thought exchange was A, how easy the unit is, and B, how much waste was being reduced. So we hadn't really heard that on our Facebook page, and of course we hadn't really talked to the group yet. So this was really interesting. I've included in your package we've taken all the thought exchange results and themed them. And I don't know, Kevin, if you want to speak to these at all at this point?
I don't think much to add to that. It was, when I read through them initially, it just seemed like a bunch of people said the same thing a bit differently, and it made sense to put them as the same thought. Some like noise and smell, you had people on either side of that. Some thought it wasn't, and some thought it was. And so even though that one has that many thoughts, that one was a bit on both sides. The other ones were probably more, wildlife a bit. Some people were still a bit concerned. Some people did trial runs, and my wife did a trial run and just left it on her deck. It seemed to, other than our dog came home, didn't eat it, but we didn't have any problems there. Seemed to have a bit of a problem when our garbage came in.
Well, we were really pleased with the thought exchange because
Can Kevin finish that? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
the thought exchange and the Facebook group and the survey itself. And I said they're an engaged group. I was really impressed with how much feedback we received all the way along. Whether it was positive or negative, we heard it all. So I encourage you to take a look at the thoughts and how they are rated by theme, so you can get a good sense. The top two being the simplicity of the unit and how much waste was being reduced. We decided that it would be important to have a portal that we could all talk on. So I created a private Facebook group. I had over 100 members join. And I was really impressed by how much activity there was. Again, it wasn't just, oh, we love it. It was people posting, asking questions, getting information. I ran a few polls in there just to get some anecdotal feedback, and people had troubleshooting questions, anything like that. We were able to answer those questions. Foodcycler was actually on from the very beginning, and I invited most of council. I think I invited you at some point. So it was great because it wasn't just me as a staff person responding to what I thought I knew. Foodcycler could come in and actually provide the research in the background. So I should add that it's still going strong. Even though the program is over, there's still, nobody has left the Facebook group. In fact, people are being added on. There's a lot of interest in the community by word of mouth. We continue to still ask a few questions. And so I don't see it going away while people still have these units. So the results, and this is where we're going to kind of get into talking to Alex in Ottawa. Our average daily use, and I brought a bucket. I know most of you have one, but this bucket here, it holds approximately 2 liters of volume. And this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I'll defer to Kevin and Alex. Volume versus weight and how all the statistics are determined at the end. But the actual up to the line, which they tell you to fill the bucket, is 2 liters. I think a lot of people fill a little bit more. So it's 2 to 2.5 liters of volume. But on average, most people are processing approximately 1 kilogram a day. And Alex, I just wanted to ask you the question because you did mention to me that Nelson seemed to be slightly higher than what they're used to in their average use.
Can you hear me okay, Ginger?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, typically we see average use being 4 to 5 cycles per week for a typical household. So it seems that Nelson was a little bit higher than that at about a cycle per day per household. So it could be bigger households, or it could be more food waste, and possibly with people being at home more, that may have played a factor during this pilot too.
That's interesting, and I talked to our city manager a bit about this. The numbers actually got a little bit higher in June when people were actually out more. So it's hard to know what factors were affecting it.
Would it not have something to do with like more fresh food? Like a lot of the food waste we produce is like cuttings from vegetables.
I think so. I think that plays a huge role. We've got a healthier population here, maybe, and are more people who are going to the markets, the vegetable markets, and in fact, a few of the people I know for a fact are vegan in the group, and they were producing more just based on their results. So just looking at the screen here, I talked a little bit about how much the bucket holds. So that worked out for the 151 participants at 1.1 bucket on average a day to 30,200 liters of food waste that was processed, or 15 tons. So we used a metric ton for that measurement. We're going to get into the statistics at the end and looking at the GHGs. So I'm just looking at the program right now, and this were just the initial results. So we pulled out a few kind of key questions, and we tried to balance it. It's not all, oh, this is a great program. We wanted you guys to see the real statistics. And again, you have the full survey results in your package. So this question went to garbage tags, and as you can see, we asked them how many fewer city garbage tags do you think you reduced by during the 3-month program. 34% said that they had the same usage, 39% said their usage was reduced, and 25% either lived outside of the city limits. And if you look at your comments, it's actually quite interesting how many people take their waste to the transfer station. So in the end of the 39%, or approximately, I can't remember how many people that worked out to, but 39% say that they did not take 187 garbage bags in that 3 months to the transfer station. Where did your food cycling waste go prior to owning a food cycler? 39% were outdoor compost, 23% say residential garbage pickup, 29% said a combination of compost and garbage pickup, and the 10% actually really was similar to the combination of compost and garbage pickup, so I would actually label that as more of closer to 39%. So that's how that went. Okay, and this is a question we're going to talk to Alex about. Did you experience any issues during the cycles that bothered you or made your overall experience unpleasant? Noise and odor being actually odor, noise, and capacity ended up being the 3 things that were brought up the most. So 33% of the respondents did say they had an issue at one point or another, 52% didn't, and 14% other. And again, if you go and look at the 14%, it kind of falls into this almost more no than, but they just wanted to add some clarification. So I'm going to let Alex speak to this and what Foodcycler is doing to address some of these issues.
Sure. So a lot of the issues, as Ginger mentioned, centered around the odors and also the noise that it makes. And I think also the learning curve associated with using the device. We heard from some individuals that they moved the unit from their kitchen to the garage since the odors bothered them. And some of these issues will be addressed in future versions of the machines, both the noise and capacity. But I think a lot of it does reflect that learning curve as people get used to using them. So we're glad to see that 52% did not have any issues and are taking the feedback from that 33% that did.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments about noise were, I think it was just a little bit unexpected. It makes a few funny noises once in a while. Most of them are like, it moans. Yes.
called there's Moaning Myrtle. Was the comment I liked.
Moaning Myrtle.
It was, or,
I,
I don't know what you put in it makes it moaning, but
different things, bananas. Don't put avocado pits in.
Anecdotally, we started in ours in the back and it moved into the kitchen.
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Like
Well,
it wasn't.
insisted it would sit in the pantry. I said, I'm not sure that's gonna work. It's never left the pantry.
I can also add that with the odor, and Alex can speak to this as well, but there was with COVID a supply chain issue getting filters. So some people did try to order filters a while ago and weren't. I don't believe they were able to get them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. But we have since brought all the filters in. They're here at City Hall, and we should be able to rectify that now. Is that right, Alex?
Yep, you're exactly right, Ginger.
Okay. Moving on, this is, I find really interesting. Would you recommend the Foodcycler to others? So even though you had 33% who had some sort of minor issue with it, you still had 83% of the group saying, yes, I'd recommend it. And only one person of the 151 said no. So yeah, overall, the emails and feedback that I'm getting, it's like, thank you for including me in this program. We love it, we love it, we love it. So yeah, it's been really positive. If the cost is the same or less than curbside collection or a similar product, would the Foodcycler be a viable long-term option for food waste diversion? 53% yes, it works great. 16% yes, but there could be some improvement. 12% maybe, still too early to tell. 2% no, this is not a long-term solution for my household. 2% are not sure, and 50% are other. Again, mostly kind of a blend of what you saw above, people just wanting to add a little bit of extra commentary there. So, moving on. Did using the Foodcycler motivate you to reduce your food waste generation? And 39% said yes, 19% no, and 42% no change. I should add that some of these statistics, like how much food waste you diverted, the people who were already composting, their numbers didn't really change in what they were sending to the landfill. But the one difference with the Foodcycler is that it can accept things like mussel shells and chicken bones and meat and cheese and dairy. A lot of those things that even somebody who composts on a regular basis cannot put into their outdoor compost.
Yes, Councilor Lautenberg.
Thank you, through the chair. This is a funny question here, because I'm imagining that if it's working, the motivation is to go the other way. Like, why would you want to reduce your food waste generation if your food waste is being taken care of?
I don't know. I personally felt like I didn't want to produce as much.
Sorry.
Councilor Morrison.
Sorry.
Councilor Morrison.
They didn't reduce their food waste, is that your?
No, like I'm just curious about this question and what the answer actually means. So if my food waste generation, and this is processing my waste, I would think, hey, now I'm more free to cook different things and throw away.
Well, if I could speak to that, I think some people like myself, we were actually using our garbage because of animals in our yard. And when you're not thinking about it so much, you're throwing it in the garbage. But when you start collecting it in a bin every day, you start to think more about what's going. That was my takeaway on it.
I have to
Councilor
say,
Morrison.
so I'm one of the yeses, because just to me it was the fact, because I actually was paying attention to looking at it. It changed what I was putting, like, it wasn't like I wasn't buying whole nutritious food. It was, I was realizing as that when I was getting to the back of the fridge to remove Mr. Mold, how many of those, and now that doesn't occur anymore. Right. It's like, because now I know, okay, don't buy that many of that. I can go to the market on Wednesday and on Saturday, and I can eat what I'm eating in between times. And yes, I'm still processing scraps, but there isn't this food that I buy and then just, oh yeah, it's garbage day, and then, you know, some of it went there, some of it would go to the compost, or some of it was like, ooh, that's too gross to put into the outdoor compost, so I'll throw it in the garbage. And so we've both become very much more conscientious about buying
It's more
food.
about separating.
So it's also about, so the no food waste. I mean, isn't that sort of the goal at the end of the day? Is it we shouldn't be wasting as much food as we waste as a society?
Right.
buying that
Definitely.
you just throw out.
And there's a whole movement for that as well.
Yeah.
And that's the next piece, I think, is the education piece.
And it'd be interesting in retrospect if we had asked this question about awareness of food waste,
You're right.
right? Because I think, especially our group that we had here are all conscious of food waste.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of the answers, I'd say for a general population, probably that more motivate to reduce food waste would probably be a bit higher. Or the awareness of food waste, I think, would be even higher. 'Cause I think you have to be aware of the food waste. It's like, you run it every day, you go, like, honestly, I create that much food waste every
And
single
again,
day.
we're higher than what Foodcycler has seen in our community, so.
So taking a temperature check at the start and asking people what they would have thought they were producing
Well,
in
we did,
kilograms.
and I can send that information to you. We actually did ask the question about how many liters of food waste did people think they were actually putting into the garbage or the compost right now. So I can send that to council.
So, if I may.
Councillor Morrison.
Just in terms of that, so, of course, as everybody around the table knows, I'm a bit neurotic about these things. So I won't talk about the electricity until we get there, but, so I was weighing I was weighing what I was processing before and after. And I did that, almost continuously for every load I put in. So I just took 10 random cycles, and 10 random cycles was 23 pounds of organic waste.
Not going metric.
Sorry,
We need
you know what?
kilograms.
I converted. I had it in metric, and then I converted it back again, and then I had, and the weight of the residual was 5 pounds. So by volume reduction, so it reduced it by 80% by weight. The volume of food that
Councillor Lautenberg.
So maybe this is then a suggestion to
23 pounds in
Alex.
10 days. I mean,
Wouldn't it be interesting to build that right into the device so it tells you like this like meter of like how much waste you've been producing?
That would be an awareness thing for sure.
And then if it's off of like if it's networked, it'd be like, and you're above average.
And it really depends on what you're processing, because I process things that have a little bit more bread in them, and they tend to fill it up a bit more. So and some things like salad just go to nothing.
Okay.
Right.
So it really depends on what you're processing.
It also says, all this bread is not good for your diet.
Yeah, put it in. That's
there
right.
was
That's right.
something that I processed that's in this number that was, I actually had something like 92% reduction in the like in one, whatever I had in there, like it, when I weighed it again, it was down by 92%. And then I had some that probably, gosh knows what I put in there, but only reduced like 68% by volume by weight. So that was my average of looking at 10, just pick 10, don't pick 10 perfect ones. But yeah, there was one that was like, I think I got like 3 tablespoons. It's like, what was in there and what was that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay, well, moving on. So I want to thank Councillor Page for donating some photos here. He did a little test, and I never did hear the results, but he actually used his garden bed, you can see here, and mixed the amendment in. So the question is, what did you do with your soil amendment, and check all that apply? So this is going to add up to more than 100% because, well, for my family, for example, we mixed it in our garden bed and we donated some as well to another garden. So 71% mixed it in their garden, 16% donated to another garden, 32% put it right into their outdoor compost, 3% put it in their garbage, 11% have done nothing, they're still collecting, and 14% did other. So just looking at this, I think it's on the next slide, looking at this bucket here, about a 19 liter pail bucket, the white one, takes 3 to 4 months, usually at a bucket a day to collect, to fill it right to the top. So I'd say you're dealing with 3 or 4 buckets a year of waste for your family, a typical family.
Smell?
Does that smell?
Like this bucket.
Oh, I'm actually looking. I was just showing you this bucket right here, but that's the same bucket. No, not at all. I have mine in my basement. I have 2 cats running around, the odd mouse. They don't go anywhere near it.
Do you not have one?
No, we have a compost.
Yeah.
We have ours open and covered in the kitchen.
Well,
Yeah, just plastic line.
The process can have a little bit of
The process
smell.
has.
Yeah,
Oh.
but the end product is
Smells like
pretty
chocolate
good.
brownies.
It's like garlic every so often.
The results I saw definitely were along the lines of the pictures we saw there. I didn't have much interest in it after the first couple days because it was a really diluted mix. I tried to get to that 1 to 15, but then some of it I did put in the backyard, attracted the dogs for a week or two.
It did attract dogs.
It did. Well, this didn't get a chance to get too wet. It was like during a dry spell where it rested for that 4 weeks. But the other stuff got wet and it attracted the neighbor dog for
Right.
a couple weeks.
Rehydrating it a bit. And Foodcycler recommends really digging it into the soil and getting that 1 to 15 ratio. Yeah, and I used it myself too, and I had no critters. I actually left it alone for a week before I planted just to see how it would do. So would you use a drop-off location for your soil amendment if provided? So 28% said yes, 33% said no, 36% said sometimes, and 3% said other. So a fairly high percentage could possibly use a drop-off location.
Well, I take this as a bit of a red herring, personally, because we produce so few buckets during the year. Like, the few people that I just don't think people would, at the end of the day, carry it down someplace to dump it somewhere. It's just over a winter.
I don't even have 2 buckets yet.
But what if you have a zero garden? Like if you are in a basement suite?
I think we could facilitate that. I think, there's lots of, we could use it in our own city limits so it might be, might facilitate it a little bit with those, but we had 16%, I gave it to others, right?
And that's we're looking at that community Facebook group, for example, where we keep it alive and people posted, hey, I've got a bucket, it's gone instantly. We've had suggestions from Foodcycler, and maybe Alex could speak to this as well, to see what other people have done, because they have quite a history with it. I do know that pigs can eat it. I've even heard chickens can eat it. So it could be to a community garden. It could be to our parks, like Kevin said. It could be like an animal
Organic
producer.
chickens.
Oh,
No.
my
Let's
friends
not go
live
there.
outside of town.
That's what Ginger suggested.
No. Didn't say that. Anyway, I think there's lots of options, and I haven't seen anyone have any difficulties yet in the program finding a place to put their amendment. And very low percentage were putting it right into their garbage. I think only 2 people of the entire program. And so, how would you rate your overall experience using a Foodcycler? Again, even with any issues that people had, it was a great rating of 4.4 out of 5. So I'm gonna just flip this over now to Alex in Ottawa to talk a little bit about some ideas they have, and then I'm gonna get Kevin to talk about the statistics related to our findings. So Alex?
Is Jesse still alive out there? Do we know?
Oh.
Alex, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay,
Still
good.
here.
Whew.
Okay, on to
Okay.
you, Alex. You've got the floor.
Can you see the slide?
Yeah, I can just see it here. So
Okay.
Foodcycler has essentially 2 models we propose for a wider adoption. The first would be something quite similar to what you're doing now, which would be to purchase the units at a preferred rate and also get a preferred rate on any filters that would be purchased. We offer our municipal customers the lowest rates on both devices and accessories. And the other model Foodcycler would propose is some kind of subscription or as a service model where a fixed fee would be paid each year by the household that would include the rental of a unit, a certain number of filters, and a warranty. That way, the fear of it breaking or having an issue is passed back to us versus being borne by the household. And, we definitely like to earn your business and would be very open to submitting bids for both those models based on what council would be interested in. And if you could go to the next page, Ginger, I'm just going to have to open that up on my end here because it got a little bit small. I'll tell you a little bit about the future of Foodcycler, and I think Councillor Lochtenberg may have looked ahead there when he was talking about the sensors and the IoT. We've heard a lot of feedback from our customers and are continuing to evolve the product. Some of the things coming in the future is one, a larger bucket. Right now, it's definitely on the small side. The second thing would be fully compostable filters. So we see it as a big problem that currently there's a plastic going into the product that, even though it's recyclable, we really don't see that as ideal. So future filters will be fully compostable. The third thing is easy repair. So the Foodcycler will be built in the future in a modular way, such that the 4 or 5 modules that make up the device could be swapped by a user. So if one part breaks, we ship you a new part, you replace it, and the device keeps working. And so it's really important to us to reduce the amount of e-waste from these devices. There's the noise issue we talked about before. We're looking into new grinding mechanisms there. And then lastly is the whole IoT, Internet of Things control. So maybe you use your smartphone to control how often it runs. Maybe you have a sensor inside that's measuring, how healthy it is, your diet, and how much you're food cycling. So those are all kind of a look into the future of where the Foodcycler would be going.
I have a question.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. So with all of these upgrades, and they sound great, what do you think the cost increase per unit would be?
It's still a little bit early to say on that since we haven't actually built them yet. We're still in the prototyping stage. There probably will be some kind of cost increase versus the existing unit, but I don't foresee it, like it's not going to be double or something like that.
Okay, and then when will these units be ready, the newer units? And are you going to be maybe not everybody wants the Internet of Things? Would you be able to get something that's still a larger bucket, compostable filters, easy to repair, quiet, but maybe doesn't have that extra smartphone component? Because that I think might be a little bit more expensive, or is it going to be sort of all or nothing on that list?
We haven't fully decided on those things, but we know that a lot of people aren't interested in having their devices connected. I'll admit I'm one of those people sometimes that doesn't need a smart fridge. So there will be models that do have the bigger bucket, but not the IoT. We expect the launch will be sometime in kind of mid to late 2021, but we're not ready to commit to a date at this point.
And Alex, you've mentioned to me a few times that there could be an option for people, like for example, who are in Nelson who are purchasing a Foodcycler now to maybe exchange, like have some sort of reduction in price of the new version if they with the old one.
Yeah, so we see potential for models where if part of the community is adopting for the Foodcycler and paying for it and a new model comes out, we see a lot of potential to work on models where maybe the older units go to people who might not have wanted to pay for one initially, and those who want to upgrade can. As with bringing out any new product, there's always a balance between, getting the people the new technology, but making sure all the old ones don't end up in the landfill. So we'd want to work with Nelson proactively on what something like that would look like in the future.
Councillor Renwick had a question queued up there.
Thank you. I have a design comment and then a question. My design comment is when you make the Foodcycler with the bigger bucket, I find it difficult to put stuff in the bucket. I keep it on the kitchen counter by the sink, and when I'm doing the dishes, it's hard to lift the lid.
Yeah.
Right? Huh? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yes.
Good. It's not just me.
No.
Because I do the dishes all the time. And the other question, Alex, is what's the life expectancy of the unit? Have you got numbers on that?
We don't yet. Our older units have been out there for about 5 years now, and they're still going strong. Our kind of lab testing shows about 5 years conservatively, but we've yet to see that kind of mass breakdown, if you will. The buckets can be less depending on what people are cycling, as the coating can chip. So probably the bucket you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 years, depending on what you're cycling. And then the unit, we would comfortably say at least 5 years.
Great, thank you.
And just so people know, Cal's actually referring to this bucket here, not the one that's in the unit. These ones are a little bit hard to, these are extra bucket and lids that you can purchase as an extra. So most of our participants don't have those, but yeah, Councillor Renwick has one, and they are a little hard to lift, so.
With wet hands.
Jim's close.
Do you have one of these?
Okay.
This program, my friend?
So we're going to move into GHG impact of Foodcycler, and again, this is a slide from Foodcycler, so I'll get Alex to speak to this one.
We have a methodology that was built for us by the Bloom Institute, which was a government-run nonprofit here in Ontario, and we asked them to estimate the GHG impact of Foodcycler. And so this is based on the analysis they prepared for us. We always try and be very conservative with this type of data, since it's always built on estimates. And we've thus prepared our best estimate and also a kind of worst case estimate for the GHG impact. And for a best case estimate, it's always what we see as the most probable case. For example, our main warehouse is in LA. We assume we're shipping directly from LA to Nelson. However, it's possible that we would ship from LA to our headquarters in Ottawa and then back to Nelson in some cases. We put that as a worst case. So we estimate that food cycling versus the landfill is saving about 280 kilograms of CO2 per year, which means in your first year, you have a saving or you're breaking even. And that over 5 years, which would be the lifetime of the unit, conservatively again, you're saving over a ton of GHG emissions. When comparing to traditional central composting, that produces about 150 kilograms of CO2 per ton, and that's before transport, and we're about half that per ton. Again, assuming a 5-year lifespan and the 4 filters per year. And it's very comparable to what you'd see for backyard composting. Backyard composting, the GHGs really depend on whether there's proper aeration and turning. Otherwise, you might have methane gases from your backyard composting, and that's why they smell sometimes. So those are our best estimates. We believe they're fairly conservative, but should be, directionally correct.
Councillor Lautenberg has a question.
Alex, does that include the power? There's got to be some variability depending on where the electricity or how the electricity is generated. Is it just so small that it doesn't fit into this calculation, or like how much does this thing take to run?
It's a good question.
That's my question. That's my question.
She can answer it. She's measured.
So I measured it.
So what I saw on, like if you did an Ontario calculation, they would factor in some GHG
Well,
production.
Councillor Morrison has some numbers.
No, I'm
I
just
believe.
saying the type of electricity.
Yeah,
Right. Obviously, in Nelson, we have 0 GHGs from our generation because it's hydroelectric.
The 50% we do. Councillor Morrison, you had a
Well, just-
comment.
Just so you asked like how much does it cost to run? I can't tell you. I don't have a GHG measure, but you can take out the kilowatt measure from the public library. Right. And I did like the grade school testing of it, and so again, that was something else that I ran and I looked at every day when I was using it, and it's about 11 cents a bucket to run, and so if I was trying to bucket every day, it would be $41.73 of energy. Like that's what it would cost
A year.
A year.
a year.
Yeah.
And if you just leave it plugged into the wall and just let it run for a year, it costs 96 cents
Right.
just to let it idle.
So
If you don't unplug it from the wall, it costs 96 cents.
The vampire draw.
So given that our
Vampire
power
draw,
is like less GHGs, does that take it into account with these numbers here?
I don't think so, because that was
It's
done in
not.
Ontario.
It's just
I don't think it would make
40.
because Ontario has
So say $42.
generation themselves.
Well,
Like-
and we do. I
Councillor
mean,
Anderson.
when we buy from Fortis, we sometimes they're getting power from Alberta and things like that, and other like it's not.
Very rarely. BC Hydro, they get all their power, most of their power from BC Hydro. They do some purchasing, but
I would say this is a bit in the weeds. There is a principle in general to, if you electrify anything and then deal with the generation on the other side, at least you're already electrified.
yeah, I think
I'm
BC
just trying to get a
Hydro
sense of what these numbers, if they're just pulled from Ontario, or
would be better. It'd be better. I think BC Hydro.
I can answer that specific one. So your numbers for Nelson are based on Nelson for 0 GHGs, whereas the figures for, I mean, our comparison to backyard composting, in this case, is still based on Nelson. And you correctly say it really depends where you are. You know, if you're in coal burning Wyoming, this is a lot less advantageous than in Nelson, where it's predominantly clean energy.
Thanks, Alex.
But I was just surprised it was only 11 cents. I was expecting a much bigger number than 11 cents.
Yeah, we had thought it was between 8 and 10 cents. But it's good to have real numbers.
And to use the public library of things.
Yes.
So did you want to speak to these next few slides?
So this one, I just thought it would be interesting to see how, because we had a group that said they compost 50% of their food waste, right? I thought, you know, will that throw averages off? Or, so I ran this by, as you see, 100 kg increments, and yeah, even those ones that said they used it once a week and did all composting and had some no real change, were still around 100. I think one was 50 something, but the other one was 86. So that was like 2 out of the.
Sorry, Kevin, I don't know where you got these numbers from.
Can you explain this graph a little bit more?
So I took the survey data, how many buckets you produce, that you processed a week. So that's 1 bucket's a kilogram. So that's basically all I did. And so if you, in the survey, said you process 1 bucket a week, you would produce 100 over the year.
Right. Okay.
This is an annual. So assuming you do that on an annual basis, this is what you would achieve over that period of time. And as you can see, most people are, you know, between, you know, 200 and 500. But we had some over. We had some over 700 kilograms per year. If we extrapolated it over the year, which, you know, they were processing 2 to 3 times a day. So I assume that would be a family would be able to do that. I know we were primarily 2 people, and we were 400. One, we produced at least 1 a day. If not, we were higher. Yeah, we were both super busy with this COVID thing, so we weren't running things out to the compost as much as we would. So we probably were more ones that weren't composting by the time we did this pilot. And I just attribute that to you just put way more things in it. Like when you wash your dishes and you have food in your strainer, you put it in here. The bananas that were in the freezer for 3 years were moving, so we thought we wouldn't take those with us. we put them in the.
Who doesn't need banana
composter
bread when they get there?
Macaroni salad that's getting old. It's sauces, all those things that that get really messy and obviously garbage, or even that compost bin that we'd be constantly washing. And kind of made a bit of a joke about our garbage because we had some, not 100% if it was a rat or a mouse, we take care of it. But our lid was missing, and it got into our bags and ripped it all up. And it's a deep thing. It's not at the top of my I want to clean that tomorrow list, unfortunately. So yeah, so a lot of that stuff that leaks out of your garbage bags and stuff, it goes in here. The other actually interesting benefit of this is that's not going into our sanitary sewer system.
Exactly.
With that high affluent that we experience here, that, I think that kind of relates to, you know, the lifestyle here that people do good fresh food and that's going, a lot of that's going in your toilet or down your sink and that gets into our, generates some, I don't know what level that is.
So when I hear that and I look at this graph here,
Yeah.
I wonder how much we're talking about. Well, like once you start diverting your waste, there is a certain set of co-benefits that are happening wherever the waste is going. It's the act of the diversion. So these numbers here that we have presented for Foodcycler versus curbside, maybe you could explain a little bit more why the Foodcycler is so much higher here than where it would be if you were just putting it in a bucket to be taken down to Salmo.
I use the RDCK numbers for curbside and drop-off. So they projected 117 as diversion for curbside. And the highest communities that they provided in the report, and that's why I kept it in the report, was if you don't have yard waste mixed in it, they're about 200. I think there was 2 or 3 communities, Nanaimo and a couple of the other communities. So the highest, at least they report to us, is about 200 kg a year. And we're at 400. And like I said, the only thing I can attribute to is you just put way more things in this than you do in your curbside. I don't know what the...
But why would you put more in the curbside than you could in the Foodcycler when you're allowed to put the same things in both?
That's just the results. I would say it's all those things. You probably don't put your lasagna in there. You don't put your sauces in there. You don't put the stuff out of your, you know. I would say my guess, and we would have to, you know, ask those consultants, is that people tend to put what they put in their composter in their compost, and that they don't put all those other things in there.
Or do you think it's because we had like Ginger was talking about the really engaged audience, like these were people that paid to be in the program, they were really engaged. Do you think that this is representative of the demographic that we chose for the pilot study versus curbside, where you're actually getting a snapshot of what's happening sort of all over the province? Like, I just don't, I wonder if we're comparing apples to apples here, if it's a bit more of an apple to orange comparison, just with the tons being 3 times the amount. To me, it seems, I don't think the pilot program was large enough or diverse enough to say that that's a true number. From a scientific perspective, it's not, right?
Well, actually it is, because that's the numbers they've achieved across the country, 365. We're at 399.
Okay.
So that was the acid test to say, what are they, you know, what they say the kilogram a day is what they are experienced nationally, and I would suspect we might, you know, I don't think it doesn't make sense that we're a little bit higher. I think our group was actually probably offsetting themselves a bit, because we had some 50% of our people said they compost. I doubt that's a national stat, that 50% of people compost, right? Even in single family residential.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So
I think that does strongly support Councillor Anderson's point that there's a group of engaged people that are working in this group. So when we add the rest of the community in, what is this number going to hold?
No, none of that is in that compost is going in the food cycle, right? So we're taking 50% out all right, to get these numbers. And you can see, you know, clearly there's some that are super composters because they process 1 bucket a week. We easy process 7, if not 8 or 9. Cass, I don't know, you process.
We were only doing 4 to 5 a week. We weren't even doing 1 a day. But it was just stuff that I've never ever thrown into the outdoor composter.
Yeah.
So
You were still composting.
yeah, no, I stopped composting during this time. But when I look at the stuff I was putting in there, it was stuff I would have never, in answering that question, there's stuff that I put into the Foodcycler that I would never have walked out and put in the composter.
Which is for sure true.
Yeah.
That's why you have a curbside program, because it's broader. But you know, like I said, the fact that that's their national success rate or conversion rate, and we're definitely in line with it, or a bit higher. So it might come down a bit. And like when I took the curbside numbers from the RDCK, they used 117 kg per year, so we could get 50% or 30% results and be competitive with that.
Okay, so it's good to know they're working from different data sets. Rick, you had a question.
What's the commercial side of this? I know they've got a commercial product. Is that something that we would want to look at?
Alex?
Oh, maybe he's.
We do have commercial sized units which range in capacity from about 40 to 400 gallons per cycle. They're typically better suited to very large producers like large restaurants, grocery stores, those type of producers. You can use them at the community level in transfer stations. It's more a logistical question of who's going to operate it and kind of maintain it. From a cost perspective, we've always seen, once you factor into account the operations of those large units, you're better off having people do it in the household rather than trying to collect and then process, because it also brings in the whole quality control issue. If you're just dumping it, you're a lot less careful as to what actually goes in. And then you get into kind of jams and maintenance issues. So they do exist. We don't necessarily recommend them for residential, though.
No. Well, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking about for commercial application, like restaurants.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
I think you're not getting picked up very well by the mic.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Alex. No, I'm thinking like, what can we do? Is there any opportunity for us to introduce this to commercial, like restaurants and grocery stores?
Absolutely.
You have a product, apparently.
And there's, you guys, at the tech show, ran into a Victoria company that was doing that, right? So I think there's...
They were making fuel, though, weren't they?
Yeah,
No, they were producing a biochar.
Yeah.
Oh, they're doing biochar.
They were doing something similar on a commercial scale.
Right.
Yeah.
And I saw some in the UK that are actually converting into electricity at the home site.
Right, but it sounds like I remember when I first looked you guys up, Alex. You did have a commercial unit, but is it used? Is it worth exploring?
I think
I think that's a problem for us, even in terms of our when you're talking about sewage. Sorry, when you're talking about sewage, they're a big problem for us.
I don't think there's a good solution for oil yet, but cooking oils. But
Oh, okay.
Alex, maybe you can.
So you can't do
speak to that.
cooking oils in this thing?
Not in the
You can
smaller
put a
units.
little bit, but you don't want.
But yeah, not too much.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you can't really. I mean, you're
Yeah.
But they have a
evaporate
separate
oil.
diversion for cooking oils, anyways, don't they?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to put it down there for instance.
No,
but that's the problem. that
people
we're
pick it up for
having.
biodiesel.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, that's a separate product.
Yeah, but that would be something.
That's a
separate.
competitive.
Is there a question there for Alex? Sorry, we're just,
Well, I was just
we're
wondering
wandering a little
what
bit.
the commercial, is there a commercial application that we should be looking
Yeah.
at?
Yeah, Alex, I
So-
think one of your cohorts originally went during the workshop, spoke to how this product came about with your work in the restaurant industry. So maybe fill the rest of council in on that.
Yes, we did get started in the commercial space. It's not actually our technology. We're the North American distributor on the commercial side for a company called EcoSmart out of South Korea, which is very advanced in food waste management. So we offer units that range in capacity per cycle from 40 to 400 gallons per cycle. So they work very well in restaurants, grocery stores. We've got a case study with a Farm Boy. It's a grocery store in Ontario that's used it. Caesar's Casino in Windsor has 5 of the commercial units that process the entire casino's food waste stream. So we do have solutions there, and we'd love to make that part of a proposal to Nelson to get some of those into the community. We've got a demo unit there as well that we'd be happy to work with you on to get it set up and running. So I think there's a lot of potential there as well.
Alex, I noticed on my travels, a lot of communities in Europe in particular, that are sort of condensed. They'll have partnerships on composting between restaurants. And I think of like Broken Hill and the Hume are literally back to back with two separate bins for.
Well, the Hume does compost all of their.
I'm just talking about the logistics of
Okay.
their two facilities that are back to back, Finley's and New Grand are beside each other. You know, there's probably an opportunity for some restaurants to share a unit, you know, in a back alley as an example. You can look down like you have Relish and the Indian restaurant and the Vienna Cafe, like they're like collective right there. So there's probably opportunities in our community more than many others to be actually come up with a where you could have one unit that would serve three businesses. Because I know in Finley's case, as an example, they carry their waste from their place of business all the way down to behind the arena.
So
Right
spaces
That's where they're.
might be a little bit of a challenge. We had young son we were having problems with because they were taking their waste down the alleyway and leaving a nice
Trail behind them, yeah.
trail behind them. But I assume you have a bucket or
But there's probably
not the garbage
opportunities. I think a commercial would be really worth exploring the commercial side of it.
And I think commercial with, or, you know, commercial, I can't remember where they were with commercial organics. It seems to make sense on the commercial side, and you get a steady customer of Safeway or restaurants, or, you know, that, and you pick up from way less, you know, the small, like we, obviously here, you know, these are really successful in an office or, you know, a lot of those type of businesses. So you don't have that, I think you have high volume and not that many commercial customers I think that would be an interesting study. Alex, have you guys done any commercial versus basically whatever central compost for on the commercial side? I would think that would be a bit closer.
Yeah, the numbers end up being similar to what it is for the FC30, the main difference being less material per processing capacity goes into the commercial units. The other exciting thing about commercial is because what goes in there is more closely managed, you open up a lot more possibilities for the byproduct. So like at Caesars in Windsor, a pig farmer takes it all and feeds it to his pigs because he knows the people that are operating the machine are being very careful with what goes in there. So there's potential to give, you know, human quality food to animals if you're processing it with these commercial machines.
Okay. Do we have
Kevin,
any?
did you want to speak to this slide at all, or did we cover it off, do you think?
This was basically my rough estimate based on the data we had to look at those G savings, and I threw in the vehicle just as a comparison. I had no idea what this compared to driving the vehicle a year, but as you can see, Foodcycler's.
Okay, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, I just thought, you know, how do you, we seem to use vehicles to judge success of
So many cars
products.
up there.
So I used the numbers that Alex provided for the cost to ship these things to ourselves by the number of average buckets people use to get that $3.99 to come up with that shipping cost. I made our Public Works said how many liters of fuel diesel they use a week to collect. It's just over 320 or so. I just used the diesel comparison that I Googled, and use that to collect. I didn't know what it would cost to, how much fuel you'd use to ship that from Roman to Samo, and how often that would be. Any of those things I think include that. And that's why there's nothing on the drop-off side. And, you know, we forget things like, you know, curbside you need bins, right? So you need to ship them here every, depending on what quality, how many people use them, and how many people eat them up. You know, there's obviously, there's obviously an embedded carbon cost, produce plastic and ship it and all those sorts of things. So I didn't try to kind of perfect this from Alex, so it's a rough calculation. And I just, as far as the GHG emission reductions, I took the RDCK for the curbside, so they estimated 451 diverted tons, have a GHG savings of the 869, so I just extrapolated those for the Foodcycler and I think drop off they had a number for that. So that's what that is.
Okay.
Amazing.
Do we have any last questions?
I'll just, a couple last comments is that I'm receiving calls and emails on a daily basis now, word of mouth in the community, including 2 different strata complexes in the community. Choquette and Amber Bay are both interested in the units. And yeah, one other little note, Baldface actually, Alex has sold them. They were looking at a commercial unit as well. And so now they are going to have 6 of this size here, and they no longer will have to take food waste and fly it out of there anymore. So that's a little local success story. Yeah, that's.
What commission are we getting on these, Alex?
It's just me, actually.
Have to ask Ginger that.
Yeah, I'm kidding, totally. Exactly.
Obviously 0.
What was I gonna say? I can't remember now. Yeah, it's anyway. I also want to thank all the participants. I'm sure they're all watching tonight. If not, they're gonna watch later because it's been a really great, engaged group. So I just want to thank everyone for participating.
Councillor Renwick?
Can I ask one last question? Alex,
I have one too, so you go ahead.
with some of these people that might be interested in the Foodcycler let's say they live in a small apartment complex or whatever, and they've got a covered deck, could you leave this outside year round? Like I'm thinking specifically the effects of winter, but provided it's covered. Is it okay to use?
We don't recommend running it in winter. We've kind of stress tested it in that application and it can work. It's just going to use a ton of electricity to do the heating in a cold environment, and we believe it negatively impacts the electronics and the lifespan. So don't recommend that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I can actually speak to that too. This unit is here because somebody actually had it outside and it got wet. And it works great now, but it needed to dry out. So, yeah, I would say they need to be inside.
We recommend you get rid of one of those other kitchen gadgets you have on your counter.
Microwaves are out. Alex, in your guys' experience, have you looked at that drop-off component? Because I think while we have a limited pilot now, having that option, even if it's not used by a lot of people, knowing that it's out there in the community to drop off these buckets, do you have bins, or have you looked at different safe solutions for people to collect these things at a transfer station that has already been processed?
Yeah, we believe some kind of a drop-off program would be helpful. And I think that goes back to some of the comments that you do have these early adopters in the program who are going to be more willing than others to work it into their gardens or be experimental with it and do that type of stuff. I think once you get further along that adoption curve, you're going to hit those users that just want a way to keep the food waste out of the trash and don't want to get too fancy with it. And so if there's a place where they can dump their 5-gallon bucket every few months, I think that would be received very favorably. And we do recommend having some kind of program like that. That's our view on it, at least.
Okay. John has a question.
No, I just had a comment. Like, Pat and I bought into this program, and I'm actually astounded what it can do. To be honest with you, it's like, and I really think there's a real opportunity for the commercial side. But what I love most about it, Alex, to be honest with you, was it gets you refocused on taking care of your own waste. And I think in the past we've spent years developing models where we have basically said to the public to generate as much waste as you want and we will pick it up. This product is sort of forcing us into taking care of it at home with little or no pickup at the end of the day. And I honestly believe that going forward, and hopefully in my lifetime, that we will see a waste system that's going to put more onus back on the producer and the consumer to manage their own waste at home, instead of us continuously spending millions of dollars on infrastructure and machinery, pits and dumps and reclaiming land just so we can dump stuff. I honestly believe we have an opportunity through this tiny little machine here to be leaders in working towards that goal of what's in here, zero waste, which is probably unimaginable to most people. But unless we start going down that path seriously, we're going to continue digging holes in the ground and throwing stuff away. Because it's just so much, you just charge more and you do more. And,
Thank you, John. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. I think that having people kind of recognize what they're actually producing is a really important part of that. So my question about that is, if it's a 5-year lifespan, are these products a part of an extended producer responsibility program, or what happens with them?
That's to you, Alex.
Well, in BC, we have that, right, for electronics.
But is this included? Because I think there's a certain quantity and they have to pay into it. I just don't know if this product is included or not.
You know that in BC, I know, like, you know, the Nelson Leafs produce all that. We have Tech Cominco Tech here, old school. At least I got past Cominco. So they process all that waste through, they turn it back in.
Tech does?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
all those metals.
Precious metals out of it.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have something specific to add about the extended producer obligations that are here in BC?
Yeah, I'll say I believe we do pay into the fees for electronics recycling, but as a company, we've decided the direction we want to take isn't just paying somebody to recycle our stuff once it breaks. We're instead changing our design and engineering such that instead we can fix it so it lasts longer. And that's the direction we've decided to focus on in the future, is designing it in such a way that it's easy to repair and it doesn't just last 5 years and we pat ourselves on the back for recycling it, but we make it last much longer.
So, Alex, along those questions, like I put a check mark beside my right to repair note from earlier. The consumable supplies that go into this particular product, I see you're moving towards compostable, but do you guys have plans to tie the consumer specifically to your filter replacements, or will there be opportunity to use people's own char that they may want to purchase, or are you guys going to implement any kind of digital rights management around the consumable supplies that you provide?
We have no plans for that right now. You can actually take the filters out completely and run it without filters outside, and it'll work just fine.
In your garage, not outside, right?
Or under a covered area outside.
Yes, carport.
No, I figured I knew the answer, but like you obviously would appreciate what we've seen going on in the appliance space around filters and sensors and things that expire prematurely and then functions don't work.
Yeah, but somebody could pry open their filters, fill it with their own activated charcoal, and have their own DIY filters. And would we prefer people buy them from us? Yes. Are we upset if they do that? Well, not really. They're still using our device and reducing their food waste. And I think once you get to the compostable filters, they'll be less expensive and more eco-friendly, which negates a lot of that motivation to do so. But to be clear, we don't plan to lock people in to our consumables only.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex, for coming. Thank you, Ginger, for all your hard work around this program and providing us and the community with an update on this. And we'll take a quick recess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council and Ginger. Have a great rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
You as well. Bye.
You should ask them if you could have heat. You ask them if you could have filtered.
John, Colin, Kevin.
50 gallons of oil in the back.
So maybe before Gabe starts, so next step, we'll bring this to a business meeting to, get some direction from you. Like I said, right now, we asked for, would this work as one of the alternatives, which may not be the only alternative. I think there's, if you're really serious about getting it out of the garbage, then we probably need clear plastic bags so that we can see both recycling and this out of the garbage. Certainly I know on recycling when we started enforcing what you're supposed to put in there, we had a lot of pissed off people. But you just have to stay consistent. Actually, how many people thought the recycling bins you could put way more than you ever thought you could put in those
I know.
things? It was amazing what you can put in there.
Amazing.
I didn't get one.
I love them.
Well, now
Well, yeah,
bottles. I'm surprised about the
But you don't
refundables.
recycle it there.
Okay, so
Not
this
that
will come,
everyone-
this will come forward in the business.
And we also, I will sit down.
Throw them on the bus, drop them at the ferry.
Also
John.
sit down with Artie, staff to go through our results with them. And, I was hoping to do that before we got here.
I did, in my last report to the RD, do my preliminary findings.
Okay,
Yeah, it'd be nice to try to figure out, I don't know why it's so outstandingly better. I can only attribute to liquor from me.
Convenience too, and
Well,
the
yeah, I
fact
guess
is
you're
you
not
can,
walking it out in the winter. And
well, I think, Kevin, there's one other piece there. I think it is the fact that it's processed every day if you need to. If you have bi-weekly garbage pickup and you put compost out there right now, you want it out of your garage 2 days from now. You're not leaving it till Thursday, 2 weeks away.
We'd even be better off to have everyone have these and pick up 4 times a year,
Exactly.
right? That would be a huge GHG savings.
okay. In the
Alright,
interest of
alright.
time, I think we've got another big discussion in front of us. So,
Small discussion.
council procedural bylaw is being brought forward, presentation from Gabe here. Staff anticipates that they will be introducing a new council procedural bylaw to council at the next regular meeting. In advance of this introduction, staff would like to present with regard to some of the notable proposed changes, review the purpose and theory behind some of the procedural tools, and provide an opportunity for council input. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Gabe.
Thank you, Counselor. And so, yeah, we're going to switch gears here. We're going to go from something that's new and flashy, and we're going to go to something that's old and dusty. So this current procedure bylaw has been in place since 2011, and it was not amended very much. I believe there was just 1 or 2 amendments that were made. So I think council and staff's goal is often to leave things better than when they got here, and that's what we're trying to do with this. We're trying to just make some minor tweaks and make it a better procedure bylaw. The bylaw that we're going to bring forward, we're anticipating we're going to do that at the August 17th regular meeting for introduction. We'll have a number of changes. We thought it would just be easier to scrap the old bylaw and put a whole new bylaw in front of you, although I believe about 90 to 95% of it will be the same. So the purpose of this session is really just to identify, essentially what we thought were notable changes. I will try to keep this brief. I have about 10 slides. I think the best format might be to just go through the slides, and if you can save your questions to the end, I think that might be the most efficient way to do this. So again, just a really quick overview. Why is a procedure bylaw important? I don't think any of you have probably sat down and read it front to back, and if you have, that'd be great. It is a 30-some page bylaw. I see Councillor Morrison may have taken the time to do that. I've been looking at it on and off all year, and so I think that's how long it took me to get a really good sense of it. But I really do believe that a good procedure bylaw leads to efficient and effective decision making. You don't always need the procedure bylaw. There's a lot of things in there right now that it hasn't necessarily been our practice to always go back and do, but I think you want a really good and clear procedure bylaw for when you do need it. So when you have a controversy or when you have something come up, you want to be able to refer back to your bylaw, and you want to make sure it's not ambiguous and that everybody can understand it. So that's some of the things we're doing here. We've also listened to some of the feedback we've gotten from council over the course of the year, and that's where some of the changes are coming from. So the changes I'm going to talk about today are agenda timelines, how we handle council correspondence, how we schedule committee of the whole delegations, the procedures that we use for acting mayor, and notices of motion and late items, and last but not least, tools that can be used to review a decision, such as reconsideration or rescinding or amending a previously adopted resolution. So the first few I think are really easy to knock out. So, we had a session together, staff and council. We heard that it would be important for this group to have more time with the agenda. We've talked about it, different departments, corporate services and administration. We do think that we could move that day back. You generally have been receiving the council or the agendas on Thursdays. We think we could accommodate a Wednesday finalization and publication to council. So that's something that we're proposing, and we'd like to formalize that in the bylaw. Currently, the bylaw only spoke to when it would be available to the public. So we figured, why not? Yeah. And again, nothing is set in stone, so this is, that's why we're here having this conversation, is to receive input. Likewise, with committee of the whole delegations, you did hear earlier today, there are some members of the public that maybe see this as a way to cut out certain delegations. I don't view it like that. I think the current bylaw does speak, although unclearly, as to how these delegations should be prioritized. Since the beginning of the new year, we have made an effort to limit delegations to 3. I think that's just the practical component of a limited time frame for these meetings, to not have you here till midnight, essentially. And in limiting them to 3, we've had good success, and we've also started using one of the slots for staff presentations, which we've also heard is something that council seems to welcome, is the opportunity to have staff come, much like this presentation, and talk about an upcoming bylaw or an upcoming policy that we're thinking about presenting. So that is kind of the nature of that change. And then again, just to prioritize delegations that are related to what's going on in your world, in Nelson in particular. As a good example, when COVID hit, we did reshuffle, reschedule, cancel some delegations that we had planned because others became very urgent. So that's kind of the nature of scheduling these. Okay, acting mayor and committee of the whole meetings. So I think this has been discussed before, but we were asked to look into the possibility of having the acting mayor on committee of the whole days chair over all 3 meetings, which would be the special, the in-camera, and the committee of the whole. The legal advice we got, we did farm this out, was that under the community charter, the mayor really should be presiding over any meetings at which he's in attendance. So technically, our council procedure bylaw, as it is drafted, is not consistent with the legislation. So our proposal is to make that change, and that would see the mayor chair the committee of the whole meetings as well. Notices of motion and late items. I think this one, I found myself this year as I was digging into this, thinking, well, what's the difference between the two, and how should they be used? And so I think, in speaking with the city manager and the corporate officer, we've come up with a nice balance here. And so ultimately, these are both tools that can be used for a councillor to see an issue or an item added onto an agenda. Oftentimes, it's hard to know which one should you use and how are they different, right? And so the changes that we're proposing essentially do add or differentiate the two. In essence, a notice of motion has always required 2 meetings. The way a notice of motion would work is that you would submit your motion to staff 10 days ahead of a meeting, which is the timeline that we require of other departments in terms of submitting reports. Then it goes on to the notice of motion section of the agenda. At that meeting, it is acknowledged by your colleagues as something that will come up on the next regular meeting. So it always has taken 2 meetings to have an item added to an agenda through a notice of motion procedure. Alternatively, there's also late items. We use that all the time. Today, I believe in the earlier meeting, we added a late item. Oftentimes, they're not controversial, and we don't actually, we don't necessarily put a motion for it. I believe we did today, which is great in keeping with our procedure bylaw. What we're proposing here is that for a late item, you would need a 2/3 council resolution to have your issue added onto the agenda. This, to me, goes to the heart of the decision-making process. If council doesn't know that an issue is coming, and if staff doesn't know that an issue is coming, we don't have necessarily the time to research and to provide guidance, and council doesn't have the time to digest and to consider the issue. So we think that with a 2/3 majority resolution by council, that'll provide a nice safeguard to make sure that only items that are truly urgent or non-controversial get added to the agenda. Alternatively, there's still the notice of motion avenue for things that could take more time, and that would allow staff and council again to digest and to do the adequate research. and we're proposing that for a notice of motion, you would still need a majority vote from your fellow councilors. The way I see this working is that it helps to ensure that no single councilor is able to abuse these tools in terms of getting things onto the agenda. I would like to say, I don't think we have a problem with this council, but when when our department works on these, we don't just think about the current council or the current staff. We think about there's going to be another council in 2 years, and there's going to be another one after that. So that's kind of just the big picture on this, is that, I think it would make sense to differentiate the two, and this seems like a logical way to do so. And in my research, I did see other municipalities, not necessarily in BC, but other municipalities do use this in Canada. This is just a quick little table that shows the main difference between the two. So notice of motion, you should be providing advance notice to staff. It would always require 2 meetings to be considered, and it would require a majority vote from your fellow councilors in order to ensure that it is added to the next council meeting. A late item would not require advance submission, could be considered at the same meeting, and it would require a 2/3 council vote, that higher threshold, because of the lack of notice. Okay, the last topic.
Gabe, I just wanted to clarify on that. Notice of motion, I know we talked about it, don't know where you landed, was we'd be looking for enough background on that, not just, I want to make a motion on X, but you would, enough that people understood what you want, what the nature of that was, as opposed to just the motion itself.
Definitely. I think that would actually be in the text, is that we would encourage that any submissions that go by the way of notice of motion would be accompanied by background information. Also, because technically you'd be submitting those 10 days before a council meeting, before they're ever presented to council. To the extent that a councilor hasn't provided any background, it would give staff a chance to do that as well, to take a look at it and potentially put together, at least a small briefing for council. So there is that piece. I think that addresses your concern there. And onto reconsideration, rescinding, and amending. So these don't come up very often, which is the sign of a good and healthy council. These relate to previously adopted resolutions. So essentially, you're looking at mechanisms to go back and say, you know what, that resolution we passed, we didn't understand the information that was presented, and we would have voted differently. Or circumstances have changed, and now we'd like to reverse course. There's limitations on when you can use these. Obviously, with all of these, you can't reconsider, rescind, or amend a motion that's already been acted on. What you could do is pass a new resolution that would supersede that resolution, essentially. So these tools aren't used very often. It did come up, this summer with a particular RFD earlier, and staff did have to spend quite a bit of time trying to interpret the procedure bylaw, because it wasn't entirely clear. So the changes that we're proposing, in my mind, effectively make sure that every council member has an avenue to bring these forward, but it does so in a much clearer manner. And so to kind of quickly go over the changes, reconsideration is a tool that is found in the community charter as something that the mayor is able to do. It gives him special authority to initiate a reconsideration as long as he's doing so within 30 days of that motion that he is seeking to have reconsidered, as long as he's initiating it within 30 days of the motion being passed. So once that 30-day time frame is over, the mayor can't utilize his powers under the community charter to have anything reconsidered. However, when he does utilize those powers, he doesn't need to seek a council vote to do so, and he doesn't need to ask for a seconder or to make a motion. He's able to put it back on the floor as if it had not been voted on, and ask council to debate and then to vote again. So it is a unique power that is again, there's a legislative basis for it for the mayor. Is there also reconsideration for?
Can I just add on that one? I view that as the mayor being the chair of the meeting, right? So to me, it's not used because the mayor has superpower and can keep bringing things back to council table. He's the chair, so if he, like in that one that happened, he heard from a councillor, you know, I think we should relook at this. And he would have to look at, you know, if Rick was, say it was a 6-1 vote, and Rick was the only one that wanted to reconsider it, probably not much point in bringing it back, right? But in that case, it was 4-3, so it made sense. I look at that more as him being the chair of the meeting and allowing if he hears from a councillor or whoever, not, you know, because the mayor really doesn't vote unless there's a tie vote, so he really shouldn't, unless there was something, you know, that, you know, he felt it was really, really important for a council to reconsider, something came up somewhere else that, you know, and we sort of did that informally on one of the letters of support that we did, and you know, when we heard from kind of the industry, some of the players in there, they said, oh, what you heard at that meeting isn't necessarily true. So that's, I think, a good council would, you know, I think the mayor would be abusing their powers if they used it to try to push their agenda as opposed to chair the meeting.
You'd be embarrassed 9 times out of 10 anyway.
Yeah, and that's the way I see it, right? You're even with that exclusive power that the community charter grants to the mayor, it actually doesn't give him any powers unless other councillors have changed their vote. Because
You have to first and second it to reconsider it.
Well, no.
We voted the same.
no, the community charter doesn't require first and second for the mayor to have it reconsidered. But again, you would need a councillor that's actually changed the way they voted within 30 days. So you need pretty much a radical shift from a particular councillor. So, but
Not so radical.
a shift, yeah.
Okay,
And
continue.
and again, this to me is not, you know, I don't want to go down rabbit holes on this. I just want to make sure it's clear for the staff that we currently have and the staff that we'll have in the future, as well as council. You know, since I've started working at the city, this has happened once. So I don't see it as something that really needs fixing. I think it just needs to be more clear. So again, the changes we're proposing would clarify that the power of reconsideration is really exclusive to the mayor, right? And that the avenue for a councillor to initiate essentially a reconsideration, but it's not called that, right, is to make a motion to rescind or to amend a previously adopted resolution. This would require that the councillor making that motion was on the side of the vote that prevailed. That's the limitation there. We don't, I think you never see bylaws or Robert's rules or other procedure bylaws that allow someone on the losing side to move that, because if a councillor or a council member was particularly upset about a decision, they could use valuable meeting time to make these types of motions, essentially kind of a sore loser type thing. So the limitation is that you have been on the prevailing side, and again, that you make your motion to rescind, which essentially would cancel the resolution that was adopted, and you would need a majority vote. So I think,
Gabe, I'll just let Sarah.
I just want to add the other sort of mechanism in place to make sure this sort of rescinding or reconsidering isn't abused or misused is that you can't even think about doing it if staff have already acted on the previous motion or the motion that you're reconsidering.
Can you clarify when you say acted on? Because you can start something a little bit or have something all the way done.
The charter just says acted upon. So
And I think
it would depend.
be material if we had a department head meeting afterwards and said who's going to do this.
yeah, and again, I think you can get lost in the weeds a little bit. There's always going to be a mechanism for council to change directions. When we're talking about acted on, I like to use the simplest example possible. Council passes a resolution saying we're going to paint City Hall pink, and then they paint City Hall pink, right? It wouldn't make sense for you to go back and reconsider that resolution or to rescind it. It would just make sense for you to pass a new resolution saying we're going to paint it green, right? So there you go. Like all you did was pass a new resolution. There was no need to go back and reconsider or rescind.
Well,
right?
clearly you would pass a motion to add white stripes
Precisely.
for Christmas.
Yeah. And so again, I think usually we're not going to be looking to reconsideration, rescinding, or amending. But to the extent that we have those in our bylaw, and they do need to be there, in particular because the community charter does speak to it, it makes sense to make them crystal clear. And that's what this bylaw tries to do.
Although on a practical point, as you know, you guys were dealing with motions from a previous council that we might decide, that was important to that previous council. It's still on our books. So we just, you know, every so often do some housekeeping and say, you guys still want to deal with this topic or not? And it's good practice to get those off the books, so they're not, you know, someone 10 years later said, you guys said we're going to do this, and it's still in the books, so we haven't done that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that would be a practical thing.
Yeah.
And then as far as things that we would act on, like if we entered into a contract with someone, you're probably going to think, you know, what's this going to cost us if we get out of it? And councils have got other contracts in the past. There's some famous, definitely provincial and federal governments that have got other really big contracts and cost them, you know, significant dollars. But you know, those would be probably obviously the exception.
So, so the 30 days, of course, is a long time, right? A lot of stuff can happen in 30 days. But stuff can happen in 30 days that would bring something back that, you know, you may have learned something about the contract you awarded or the contractor or
Oh,
something along
we're
those
sued
lines.
by another bidder, right?
Yeah.
You know, those sort of things.
Yeah, so
Have to put.
Yeah. No, 30 days is,
there could be a lot done, and it still could be bring something like that back.
absolutely. Yeah. This last slide is really just, again, one of these recap slides. So just really quick, reconsideration is for the mayor. There's that 30-day limitation. It puts the resolution back on the floor. It would require a majority vote. And once it's happened once, it can't happen again. So something can only be reconsidered once. On the other hand, motions to rescind or amend, that would be any council member that was on the prevailing side could initiate that. That would require a mover and a seconder. There's no limitation on in terms of time. It's essentially a motion to cancel or change a previously adopted resolution. It would require a majority vote, and a council member can only make that motion once. Again, to kind of prevent that, you know, if you have a rogue councillor that's always going to be making a motion to rescind something, even if they were on the prevailing side. You see that a lot in procedure bylaws as well. So those are my slides. I think that was pretty quick to go through, and you know, I'm happy to answer questions. I think also the corporate officer and the city manager can also chime in on some of these.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, so can you just explain what we consider a delegation and what's not considered a delegation? Because I would never consider a staff presentation a delegation, but if we are, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that is supposed to look like at committee of the whole. Like in your mind, what is sort of the perfect committee of the whole meeting? And what are we trying to achieve with this?
Yeah, I think a perfect committee of the whole meeting, you know, is a meeting that has 2 to 3 presentations that relate directly to council priorities and other strategic considerations for the city that are informative and clear and well prepared. That's ideal in terms of presentations.
Tonight is an example of the civic.
Yeah, the civic, that was something that council indicated on Friday that they wanted, and boom, we had them here on Monday. So, you know, that was a quick turnaround on that presentation. But, oh, sorry, I was just
going to say the business side of it is definitely that. You know, you want a forum where, because I'll back up a bit. In the old days, councils had committees for everything. And there's a famous, one of our former mayor that became a consultant, he used to call the culvert committee. So everybody hopped in the truck and drove out to look at the culvert and had a discussion around the culvert. And they, you know, and municipalities went to committees of the whole, because what would happen is you had 2 people on that committee, then when it came to council, everybody wanted to know all the information anyway. So now you had to retell the whole story. No one just took the word of the culvert committee. They actually wanted to know what color the culvert was and all those sorts of things. So that's how the committee of the whole really came about, was all of council heard the same story.
So sort of like how we decided like not to sort of, you know, be on like, you know, I can't remember what the list was, but like on the Tram Society and stuff, it's like we'd rather all hear about the Tram Society rather than having one.
But they also had it for internal operations, so they'd have the fire department committee and the public works
Well, it wasn't a committee, Kevin, it was individual councillors were appointed to public works, hydro, fire, etc. So as an example, if you wanted your road paved, you phoned Janice because she was the head of the public works.
Okay.
So then when it came to the table, that council at budget time was hammering on the table
They
for
were the
more money.
advocate for public works.
For
and
more
you're an
money for
advocate
public
for
works,
fire.
Right.
Somebody else was an advocate for this. And
advocating for their own committee, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I will say
Committee of
that
the whole is actually a better, much more informative system.
okay, yeah, and
'Cause I
that's
did
why
ours
you'd
on
have,
both.
and that's why we use it for staff as well, because it's
Yeah.
important work that we need. You know, you need more background and you need more direction, and that's really before it comes to the formal table to vote on something. You want, you know, you have that avenue to have a bit more informal discussion, ask more questions, not feel pressured that you have to vote right at that time. So that's kind of the business side of it.
I just want to keep our meeting a little running. Rick had his hand up.
Sorry, I just, one more follow-up from that, if I may.
The
So,
delegation side is probably the more tricky. The ones that relate to your business, you know, it's really clear. You know, like the Civic tonight,
yeah,
right? That's your business, your building. You want to know before you make a decision on it.
so
Where
look,
it starts to get gray is it's just a community group that just wants to tell you what they're doing, which is, you know, interesting to hear. However, is it keeping you focused on the work you want to do? And it's hard to know because they might come up with something and you go, oh, geez, we never thought of that. Maybe that's something is, but if it's clearly not your business, then it's, you know, those are the ones that are more difficult.
sorry, I just had a follow-up question. You just continued speaking. So we'll still have the public participation and presentations like we had today with Jesse and the musician, and then the delegation. So tonight we had 2 plus the late item, so that will be sort of the length will be the Foodcycler, the staff presentation, and then the civic. So that is sort of the structure then. It would be those 3
yeah,
at the end.
the headings themselves wouldn't actually change on the agenda. So it's really just that delegation section that we are looking essentially for, you know, direction to limit those to 3, which is something, again, we've been doing since January. And in terms of vetting delegations, we always do that. We do try to tailor them to things that are before this council. If a particular councillor says, can you work with this group to get them to present, we do that as well. If it's coming out of left field and it's a group you know, that we haven't heard from, that doesn't seem to be directly tied to something that's going on or to a council priority, those groups sometimes it's harder to schedule. And it's really just, you know, I do value also the, you know, the fairness of allowing all groups to come present to council, but you guys are a popular bunch, and so it's really just from a practicality standpoint, being able to cut it off somewhere.
And so what if if we put it in the procedural bylaw, then, you know, if all of a sudden there is 2 more that come up, will that not then preclude them from from staff being enabling them to present?
Well, to the extent that we're, again, and this is what we've been doing since January, once we've hit our limit of 3, you know, sometimes we do need to reshuffle things if something comes out that is more urgent, like during COVID. But having said that, we essentially schedule these out many months ahead of time. There's times we've been booked 4 months ahead of time for cow presentations. So if a group, you know, is relevant to council and can't get on for July, we would say, are you available in September, which is our next one. So it's essentially kind of a scheduling game.
And 2/3
Councillor.
majority you can hear. You can ask to hear that group of it.
I've got
4 urgent ones. You do have. It's not like we can't, because you normally would.
Okay.
Are you good, Councillor Anderson?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Rick, and then we'll go to John.
Thank you. So the first thing is the notice of motion. What's a little confusing about this one for me is if we put it forward and there has to be a vote by council on whether to approve this motion for the next agenda, there's going to be a debate, right? You're going to have a discussion and debate about it. In which case, if you're going to have an informed debate, then there's got to be background information. So
Well,
it seems a little,
to me, it doesn't have to. I think sometimes, you know, a council that wants to debate finds a way to debate things, even when they're not really before them. The debate should really, you know, again, it should be a vote as to whether that notice of motion will be added to the next regular business meeting.
Yeah,
So
but
you shouldn't actually be getting into the merits or into the substance of the notice of motion, in my mind.
but you kind of will. Like, how would you?
Good chairing.
good sharing.
Well, you do.
I
I had this very same conversation with Gabe and Sarah on this one, because I find it hard. Like, I think you don't wanna put things on as resolutions that throw you off track, so I think a good council does say, is this important at this time? Cause you have another avenue through your priority setting to say, so these should be, we need to do it within this 3 months versus we should do this. Cause you
Yeah.
have another avenue, we should do this.
But if I'm a councillor putting forward a notice of motion and I get, and the majority of council agrees with that,
Yeah.
there's a reason for it. It's not like, you know, you've had the priority setting and something's come up, as has happened a few times, but
For
something comes
you,
up.
right? And I think your debate is, why is this urgent now?
Yeah, and exactly, the debate
Yeah.
is why it's urgent now.
So limit the debate, not necessarily all the ins and outs of it, how do we do it?
Yeah,
Consult with
sure.
all
I
those
was
sorts of
just
things.
thinking about efficiency because it seemed like as much as the goal of this is to make it more efficient, which in fact you might do is make it less efficient by adding 2 debates on the same topic. But if
I think
not, then great.
The idea too is that when it comes back that second time, right, it has, you know, resources have been put into crafting a report.
Sure.
And I think,
Yeah,
you know, one thing I did want to mention is, as Kevin just did, is that, you know, that priority setting piece of this whole thing. And again, it's one of these things that we're addressing because I find that the procedure bylaw lacks some clarity on and, you know, notices of motion can be a bit confusing.
Yeah.
But I would look at this particular council and say, well, we don't have a notice of motion problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not like we have these coming up every meeting. So again, it's just trying to add some clarity and yeah, like you said, to make the process more efficient.
Yeah, but that's I'm happy if I'm just noticing that this might make it more cumbersome rather than less cumbersome. But if
Yeah, no, I
Are you good with that question for the moment,
good
though?
with
So I
that
can-
one, and I have another one, but I can wait.
Can you wait?
Yeah,
I'll put you
I'm
back
happy
in
to
the loop and we'll go to John.
So,
happy to wait.
Sorry, just on that.
Janice will remember this, Doug J was the master of the notice of motion. And when he was a
Oh, no.
counselor,
Bucky.
and the reason he was the master of it, when he decided he wanted to bring something back, he'd go and he'd sit down with staff and he prepared a really good report.
Yeah.
And he'd bring that forward to the meeting, so he had a platform for bringing it back. And that's what would be talked about, so he would have a platform, would get it back on the table. And I think that's being touched on by Gabriel, and in future, you know, or I would advise any one of us to take that approach.
Sure.
Go in and sit down with Gabriel or Sarah or Kevin and say, look, I'm thinking of bringing this back. I think there's potential for some change here that could make this better, or depending on how council feels, of course. And then you'd prepare your background and you'd deliver that to council. So it took a lot of the sort of, why is it coming? What's the basis for it, et cetera, right? So you bring it back on a good platform. And Doug was good. He did that. He was meticulous as heck with his notice of motions, and were hard to turn down. And doesn't mean he was successful all the time, but he generally had a very good foundation to work from.
I would also say in those days, you know, council priority setting and strategic planning wasn't very
Wasn't
strong
as
in those
robust,
days.
no, it wasn't, I agree, yeah.
You know, there wasn't really, that was the only avenue to, you know, kind of get things on the table. So
But it's still, Kevin, excuse me, but it's still a good idea to do that. So Keith, if it's something you wanted to bring back, sit down and
yeah, my only,
get some
again,
help with that.
caution is we will look at it as a lens of where council's priorities are, because really that allows one council to, you know, basically get in the front of the line from what you all agreed to.
But
So
that
one of our challenge-
conversation though, Kevin, excuse me, but that conversation with me or a particular council could be enough to say, well, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe we just leave it alone.
Yeah, that's
You
what I mean,
understand
that's
what I'm
just one of our lenses, right?
yeah.
To say, is this urgent? Do we
Yeah,
have to do it now, or we're having priority setting in 2 months now, we kind of wait. And if there's something compelling, why it can't wait, then
Sounds
Good job, Gabriel.
Rick, do you have another question there?
Yeah, the second one's on the late item. Yeah,
Yep.
2/3.
So again, it just differentiates to me the notice of motion versus the late item, and I think it kind of goes to what Kevin was just saying, which is that, or the city manager was just saying, it's really about consensus, right? If you're bringing a notice of motion and you want to get it on that next agenda, you have the consensus of your council. If you're bringing a late item and staff and your fellow council members haven't ever seen it before, right? I think that's a higher threshold because it kind of safeguards the process. You're going to need more support to say, hey, I'm bringing in, and again, it hasn't been a problem with this council, but you can just imagine, there could be a more contentious setting where someone's trying to add late items for issues that, staff and other council members aren't familiar with. And I think it goes back to the heart of a good procedure bylaw. What is going to support good decision making, right? Not a rush decision by getting things on an agenda as a late item if they don't really belong there. But it's going to be giving council time to digest something and staff time to prepare a report. So that's where that comes from. But I do understand your concern as well, because 2/3 is a much higher threshold than a majority.
And generally consensus, I think, is a good way to go, but it also runs the risk of being anti-democratic.
Well,
No.
again, you've also got the notice of motion.
Yeah. No, it's a good answer. It's a good answer.
Yeah, you have to elevate it. Why is a notice of motion not appropriate?
Yeah.
It has to be at that urgency.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
And I think a piece that's important for me is that the notice of motion process is solid and defensible and actually can go somewhere. Because, like I have put them in specifically to see what will happen as this piece of paper moves through or doesn't.
On the one that you raised, and as an example,
Yep.
to me, Sarah reminded me that was discussed at priorities and it was decided to put that off. That's why that didn't progress. But we try not to forget something, but if something's old, it could happen.
Go ahead.
But it was
Councilor Lockenberg.
That's what happened.
Thank you. So then, one thing that we may want to consider for this bylaw is to enshrine something related to workshops and strategic planning or priority setting and yearly priority setting review, probably prior to the budget.
Yeah.
Ideally, yeah, for sure. Definitely is
Exactly.
what we try to do.
No, if a piece of the language is,
That's not a bad idea, and that's something that I hadn't considered, and I would definitely, take a look at that and talk to the corporate officer about potentially addressing that. And I think, again, as I would just point out too that in this report, one thing that we do mention is that, and I think you guys are all, I think council is very well aware of this. At the end of the day, it's a resources question, right? It's often a staff resources question. Are you adding something onto someone's, dev services work plan? And if so, what are you taking off? Right, and that usually is best served for a priority session, which is why I think the report notes that, even if you push something through as a notice of motion, the staff report might essentially be, a high-level backgrounder that recommends that it be tabled until the priority setting session. Because there's some things, and again, it hasn't been a problem with this council, but you can imagine a council where a particular councilor is trying to add issues that weren't discussed at a priority setting session that are going to take up a whole lot of staff resources. Is that fair to other councilors? Right? That's kind of the question.
and I think what's important there is that staff has those templated responses for, and if there is a tool enshrined in the procedural bylaw around priority setting that says, hey, we don't have the resources right now, but you're going to be together in 3 months. Because most things we're going to be dealing with really do need to have that very long window on the policy side that isn't going to be within a 3 or 6 month time frame anyway. But ensuring that that process ends up and there's a list there that then they're going through, then I think that is defensible, because it is like, okay, template response, not enough staff resources this round, let's put this to priority setting, and then having that confidence that at priority setting, those pieces are there to be discussed again.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would note on that topic really quickly is just that, the way I view the procedure too is that, you shouldn't be trying to use these tools, late items and notices of motion, to add, major items to an agenda. Say you have a letter of support from a group that you want to get onto an agenda. Late item, notice of motion, no problem. Probably a late item. It's not controversial. You'll get your 2/3. You get it on the agenda. Can staff crank out a letter of support? Yeah, we do it all the time, right? On the other hand, building a new library, is that appropriate for a late item? No, right? So using some discretion there, I think, is important as well.
If nobody else has some questions, I have some questions. So around the transparency area for the procedural delegations, are we considered, or there's been some thought processes on providing the list of people who are not becoming delegations? Like if we're putting people in a parking lot or people are getting outright rejected, how do we bring some transparency to council of what delegations are not making it to us.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't formalize that in the procedure bylaw. I think you just have to ask the question. I'd be happy to provide that information. I have a list, right? I'm the staff member that's responsible for scheduling those, and I keep a very detailed record of who applies and who gets on, and we track the correspondence. And so, I'd be happy to provide that information. I don't think it's necessary to put it in the procedure bylaw.
Well,
Yeah, I agree with the deputy corporate officer over there. We often will have a conversation about who should and shouldn't have a delegation, particularly if we've already got 3. And we tend to take a look at council's strategic priorities and figure out who fits best within those and whether they fit at all. And that's often we can tick a couple off and say they actually don't fit. And so, but again, yeah, it's not necessary for it to be sort of formalized in the bylaw, but certainly available.
okay.
If you ask for it.
And that might be one you want a bit of a philosophy discussion as council and make sure and on the same page, what's the consensus? Like, do you want a group, we've had ones that you've turned down something, you want them to come and kind of eat that publicly if you've already made that decision. It's not like you need any more information or whatever. There's certainly an appeals process they can appeal to, so I think you just need to have that. Do you want to just hear from broad community groups, even the now line? So I think you're having, like Gabe and Sarah will do a much better job if they kind of understand what your philosophy is. If whoever writes in, or do you want to be a bit more strategic? Or is there other tables that they should be at? No, you should go to the rec commissioners.
On that note, when we first started the committee, the whole Kevin, and we had too many delegations because we
One said yes.
yeah, you're better to have few and have good presentations than have a whole bunch and you're sitting here with your eyes glazed over when the last one shows up, because they generally go much longer than the 15 minutes. And if they're connected to something we're doing, they definitely will go longer than 15, because we'll want to know where it's at, what you're doing. So even tonight, we could have spent much longer on the theater, I thought, but we got through it. So they can be half an hour or more lots of times, so there goes a couple of hours right there.
Okay. On the issue of correspondence, and I'm wondering if you want to have more of a discussion on how people have access to what I'll call executive carpet bomb staff and council with issues that doesn't really lend itself to much transparency.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you asked that question. I think I didn't actually address that in the presentation, and I meant to. So, I think, the corporate officer and myself and the city manager have talked over the past couple of months about what the best method for handling correspondence is. The procedure that we've come up with, that we've been using, I think we've done it twice now, is really just to capture correspondence that you're not seeing electronically or through some other means. And again, to collect that over essentially, a 12 or 13 day period, and then push it out to you as a package, a Friday before a council meeting, to me struck the right balance of taking those conversations off email, essentially, allowing you to see the correspondence and giving time also for, again, if a correspondence comes in addressed to council, but it's a public works issue, it gives time for staff to show public works, potentially have staff respond, and then package it all up to you so that we can keep you on a higher level, right? So we can keep you out of the weeds so that you can see the correspondence and the response. So I thought that struck a nice balance, and that's why we're proposing it. But you guys are the ones obviously that get that package, and so this might be a good time for you to kind of give staff a little input about how you feel about it.
Well, and my question specifically is around those correspondence that are emailed or CC'd to the general mailbox for council that don't end up in that correspondence package, but do push policy in some instances, that maybe the public has more of a need to see what people are requesting, that if someone had come down to a public presentation, there'd be a much higher bar of what conversations were trying to be had with council.
Well, I guess the only thing I would note, Councillor, is that the correspondence packages that we've been publishing, in my mind, we weren't making those public. It's correspondence that was addressed to council, and it's correspondence often back from staff to that individual member. So there's, I'm not sure that we were ever intending on attaching that to the agenda or making it public, more broadly. Again, it's correspondence to you as council.
This might be something separate, but if people are having a conversation with all of, or trying to persuade all of council to take a particular position on something through a concerted campaign over email, I think the public probably has a strong space there to want to see what that conversation is, or that avenue needs to have some increased formality around it to prevent simply carpet bombing the executive team of City Hall, including council, with a particular issue until they get movement on it.
Right.
And I think that's separate from your packages, which I appreciate your packages.
Good point.
Because I think your comment at the beginning is, does council want to do some policy work? Either your policy you don't think is appropriate now, or you don't have a policy on that type of thing. And I think that always needs to be there, as opposed to necessarily solving the issue, the particular issue. And not to say there'll be some small things, but generally that's staff's job to do, and quite legit. Where are we with this? That's a quite legitimate question to have. You just have to be careful it doesn't, all of a sudden trump everything else the people have been waiting for, and all of a sudden it's the number one issue, and maybe it's super urgent. And so those type of lenses, is there, do we need to change policy? Do we need policy because we see this as a broad community issue versus an individual, someone's complaining about their snow clearing or whatever. You might in budget say, we're actually hearing a lot of snow clearing issues. We want to put more money into snow clearing. When you start to solve individual ones, then the squeaky wheel thing that Tracy talked about. The person that knows someone all of a sudden gets their issue resolved, and the person that doesn't look at the email
Doesn't have the access.
or whatever.
I also
Never
think there's,
coming up.
we could have some privacy issues with
Right.
publishing that kind of correspondence.
Yeah. And someone always says, well, you have to know what to ask for if you're going to make a freedom of information request.
Yeah.
But there might be a space here where the policy dictates when that person is cut off that access channel, right? Like I would cut off a speaker who continues to go on well after 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 minutes. There's eventually,
Yeah.
Decorum has to be reestablished, and I think the email domain channel needs similar places where it's like you've had a moment to have your say. You can go to the public space and have that say in a transparent way, because we're cutting off this channel, because you shouldn't be able to keep sending your thoughts in over and over and over and over.
Form when a platform isn't necessarily due.
Might be exactly what they want to do.
Yeah. So that would be just something that I would be careful of.
Yeah, well, it's like the public presentations, right? Like that's where things can get started. I'm just saying.
Which is great, right? Because then there's, people have 5 minutes and they're able to give a public presentation where, we do receive, there's some individuals that email us on a bi-weekly basis and it, becomes overwhelming. But I don't think by giving them a public platform that's an appropriate.
But what I'm suggesting there is that the policy may want to define that we have a process by which we determine that person is simply not allowed that channel of communication into council anymore, and they can come to the 5-minute, and it may be a situation where it's just better to deal with it and move on, but not give them continued access.
And remember, your 5 minutes, you cannot.
Cannot bring things up personal. You have to read the thing, and then you're not going to debate it with the person. You have to read what the
Fair enough. I'm just putting it out there just as my observations over the last 2 years that it seems to be a bit of an open door that some people use and other people don't.
It's a small number of people, though.
I know.
We've been here for the days of Klaus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were for the last of them. I have one final, and it is around the acting mayor piece. So do we not have any channels? This request came through from council to recognizing that we're kind of a progressive community, and we've been doing this situation of professional development and integrating the council into the chair position on the committee of the whole. Do we not have an avenue to request through municipal affairs or an exemption, or is there any other avenue to move what the wording that's in the legislation now that we find, that you guys have determined is inhibiting us from continuing this practice of me sitting in this chair,
Yeah,
being the chair tonight?
I mean, my thought would be, Councillor, is that, it's not typical for a municipality to ask for a particular exemption from the community charter from the province. Like, I doubt that would be granted. And again, I'm relying on the legal advice that we received from outside legal, essentially saying your procedure as it is now is not consistent with the community charter. So that's, I'm comfortable with that opinion. I've looked at it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess workshops aren't, things that aren't council meetings, I guess you could do it. Your avenue is UBC. That's how you do it. That level of change made is UBC, and you have to
And
support that.
yeah, and municipal legislation is interesting. Like, we've been doing this for a long time, and no one's ever barged in here and shut down our meetings. But I think it's our obligation to abide by the community charter as much as we can.
Well, and your danger is if you talked on something in the committee of the whole, you were advancing a decision, it goes in favor or against, in favor of someone, say a developer or whatever, and there's a high interest of getting their project approved, then they will challenge the process. And the process is everything for local governments. If you screw up process, they'll reverse the decision, you'll go through a court case, and there's nowhere, don't have that many high stakes developments here, but in larger centers, that happens.
So I'm hearing there is a mechanism that could be utilized to ask for an exemption for something like this if council felt that this was a strong enough value.
Not for an exemption, you'd have to get BDCM to change,
You'd actually,
get the
okay.
government to change the legislation. So you need your colleagues to, and your other municipalities to think this is a good idea, and we think it is. It's a good development opportunity.
Well, how long has this practice been in place?
Well, the
Quite a while.
charter's been around since.
You mean our practice, I think you're talking about?
Well, both, like when community charter's been around for how long? 20?
Is it 2002?
2002?
When did it replace the Municipal Act?
Okay.
Yeah, I just think as Gabe said,
This is in the 90s.
Was it 90s? 93?
How long have we been doing this?
it came out when I was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was 2004.
Community charter?
Too long,
Yeah.
obviously.
We've been doing the Cal thing for a long time. I just find this, I mean, I was one that sent the email out, and I just find this unfortunate on a number of grounds in terms of the fact that it does give people that maybe want to pursue a political career an opportunity to hone their skills, because chairing a meeting is difficult on the best days. I mean, I think chairing a cow is the least contentious of anything, because we don't do business at a cow. I mean, this is where the unfortunate part comes. I understand your argument about a developer. I don't understand listening to Foodcycler that we're not making a decision about, or even talking about this bylaw that we're not making a decision about tonight is dangerous precedent.
It's advancing the decision. So it's not making the decision, it's advancing the decision, and it's ultimately the topic.
Yeah.
Because you're offside community charter.
And I think what's interesting for me about
But if I could
this is, sorry, Councillor
Sorry.
Morrison, by all means, it's your privilege.
Now you made me lose my thought. It's just, and it's also the fact that it does relieve. This is a benefit to the councillors. This is also a benefit to the mayor of the day, because it relieves the mayor from having to do the job of chair, which is sort of, there's the job of mayor, but then there's actually a structural job of being the chair, which takes the chair in many occasions out of being able to participate fully in the debate. Although he can state his case, or she can state her case, it shouldn't be like a back and forth. And so I think that the mayor not being the chair allows for more fulsome participation in the discussion of some topics more fully, because then he can be part of the debate. And that's where I think that we lose some of the opportunity. I mean, if the rules are the rules, I mean, you guys all know I'm the rural bunny over here. I'm the rural person. And it never had crossed my mind that having somebody else chair the cow meeting wasn't in the proper use of the. I knew it was in the bylaw because it was in our bylaw. I didn't know it was a contravention of the charter because the fact that we have done it for as long as I can remember. So
I think
it's kind of.
it came in definitely more here, because I don't think that's how it was initially. And it was done exactly for that reason, to give both opportunities for counselors. I think it's a good thing. We just need to, get some support out there from others.
And that's the whole thing about having like the meetings, like when we have the budget meetings and things like that, is that it's great to have somebody else chairing that and keeping order of who wants to talk about budget items and allowing the mayor, who often comes with more experience, to do that.
The old way,
Yeah.
old days,
Yeah.
how fast the gavel. But for me, I'm quite happy the way it is, but at the same time, if you have to meet the regulations of the community charter, the Municipal Act, for everything else, then you should meet it for that as well.
Well, sure, I don't disagree with that. I'm not saying that
You
that
can't
it's
pick and
wrong.
choose the pieces that you.
It's just that it's unfortunate that this is the way it is. I didn't bring it forward to become controversial. It was brought forward by me, and we now have
Clarity on it.
an answer.
My question still lies there around, did we end up in a grandfathering situation if the legislation changed or we did this after?
It looks like the Municipal Act, prior to the Local Government Act, the Community Charter did allow for an acting mayor, and it was vague enough.
Oh, there's an
There's
acting
still an
mayor,
acting mayor.
because somebody has to take over
Yeah,
if he
but,
gets sick.
there's no further definition about it.
No.
It says the council may appoint a member to be acting mayor, and the acting mayor, blah, blah, blah. So that's about it. So you can
But
do whatever
when
you
you
want
look at the
Well,
Robert's
only
rules,
when the mayor's not there.
It doesn't say that in the Municipal Act.
It doesn't.
So that, I'm
It's
just,
not, way back.
like, way back.
The
is
way
what I'm
back
saying.
one.
That's the grandfather.
And that's probably the clarity that came about, is that? So it came
They
up
cleaned it up.
because, the special meetings, and it just seemed, the reason we asked the question was, you could have a rogue council that basically voted the mayor out of being a chair, right?
And that's,
Whereas the community charter says the mayor's supposed to be the chair, and you could have, oh no, we're gonna do all meetings now, and the mayor's not going to. And that's why I asked, this doesn't make sense, that a council could just decide the mayor can't chair any meetings?
when the
Any
mayor was
meetings?
elected to preside at
Yeah.
meetings. That's the other
And clearly it's
principle.
in the legislation, I thought that doesn't, there's no way that you can do that, right? So it really didn't come out of the committee of the wholes, it was, could we chair the meetings for special meetings and stuff like that.
but that's why I think there's an opportunity here to look for a center balance, because all the procedural stuff we see in Robert's rules does speak to the fact that bodies often sit down and decide who their chairs are for their own governance purposes, like rogue or not. The mayor's elected, of course, but just boards and councils generally through history have had that ability to say, who will be chairing this meeting so that we can get the best decision-making going out.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's how it works at the regional district, but that's not how it works in the city. When people vote for them, they are voting for council and they're voting for mayor. They're not voting for council and then council chooses the mayor. They have democratically chosen, so it's not up to council to then choose. It's up to like the whole structure would have to change. Otherwise, it's not democratic. When they're intending to elect a mayor, that's that mayor's role. They didn't elect that mayor to be a councillor. They didn't elect one of the councillors to be a mayor.
Yeah.
So if the structure is this like it is in the regional district,
Or any other board or board.
yeah, but then that would be different. But in this case specifically, the whole charter would have the charter would have to change.
I think your solution to the mayor's point was simply that if the mayor feels like it, he has the power to give up the gavel to participate in debate. He could do that for an extended period of time if he wants. So,
I mean, that's not consistent with the opinion we got.
With the wording the way we have
well,
it.
there has to be some way for the mayor to give up the gavel.
Well, you give it up,
It's only if they want to debate.
debate in a particular item.
Right.
So the mayor's not supposed to, or the chairs.
All right, have fun there, because this is your last night.
Okay.
But on so you guys should
That stretches
raise
us
that
out
with your
another hour.
colleagues out there.
No, I think there's validity, because we were talking even just earlier about the culvert committees, and we've already seen, I think, a change in how this governance structures have shifted. You don't have the prevalence of service organizations and societies you used to, so you don't have people practicing Robert's rules on a Thursday night the way they used to the extent, and the committees and all the culvert committees and the West Culvert Committee and the South Culvert Committee and the Culvert Committee of the amalgamated zone of Salmo and Area F are no longer meeting, and so these opportunities to do chairing just do not imbue inside the community as much. And so I do think it's something we should bring up with UBCM and look
Learn
for a
the
little bit of
pros and
changing.
cons by watching too.
Hmm?
You can learn the pros and cons by watching as well, right? You know, that's,
Maybe.
it is what it is.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
we've flogged this particular horse. Thank you, Gabe,
Horse is dead, get off.
for your really succinct and clear presentation. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Gabe.
If there's other thoughts, over this next little while, just
Put in a notice motion.
We'll be coming back.
Right.
So hang on,
We're not done yet. Does anyone have a council report?
Gabe, this is coming back for adoption at some point.
yeah.
This will come back for introduction in first 3 readings.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
I just want to give the table an opportunity if anyone has prepared council reports. I see Councilor Lautenberg's hand, so we'll start with you.
I'll be really quick. So the UBCM Climate Action Committee is done. The report is now out for public consultation and engagement, so you'll be able to access the report. I can give you a preview if you'd like. There will be a set of public meetings related to that report, and then it will go to the board for adoption as UBCM policy. So it's going to become official UBCM policy if the board passes it. So I think it's a good opportunity to get in and add some comments to it. Particularly, we have these signature initiatives that in each section, and there's a few of them that are particularly relevant to the city of Nelson. The big one is around retrofits. If this passes, UBCM's policy will be to have 500,000 deep retrofits in BC. 500,000 homes, deep retrofits in BC, 100,000 new homes built at a zero emissions standard, so passive house standard. So it's a massive transformation of our provincial building stock. And again, the province has said through Clean BC that this is going to be a top priority for them. The federal government has said it's a top priority for them in terms of their climate mitigation. So yeah, it's exciting. If it passes, it's another big opportunity for Nelson and its EcoSave program, as well as generally for the province. Secondly,
Question?
yep, go ahead.
I think that's a great idea, but again, where's the money come from? Like, we talked about the carbon
Yep.
Pricing might be an option for funding these projects.
Yeah. That's a great. It's a great question. Carbon pricing came up in one of the meetings at the committee, and how does the pricing model fit into it? It's pretty controversial, and because this was a broad provincial committee, we had Lori Ackerman up at Fort St. John and various others. It didn't get very far, so I think more work needs to be done on that. The model for financing is similar, or proposed is similar to our EcoSave program, which is it's a financing model. So it would take a PACE style, a property assessed clean energy model financing. So it's going to take provincial action for this financing system, but ultimately the homeowner would pay, and they would get a low interest loan paid back on, ideally to offset their power bill. So that's the concept. Having said that, Mayor, the momentum towards pricing pollution, I think, is gaining strength. The case that we signed on to at the Supreme Court, I think a new date's been set. Kevin, do you know?
I have not.
Okay. But it seems to be that the opposition is weakening, the strength is building, and the interest in terms of the recovery about what do you do with that money. Right now, the idea of carbon pricing is to send the money just back to people. Almost 100% just returns to the taxpayer. The concept, though, is we've got so much work to do. It'll still go back to the taxpayer, but to the mayor's idea, it could go back to the taxpayer to then do say, a retrofitting to do actual mitigation that will, in the end, pay that taxpayer in savings over time. So it's a smart, but it's a little bit of a nudging concept there. So work needs to be done on that. And then on that, I have a meeting with the BC MCLC, the BC Municipal Climate Leadership Council, which is a number of mayors and councillors that's chaired, organized by the Community Energy Association, who's doing our Nelson's, some of our plans. We have a meeting next week with George Heyman, Minister of the Environment. One of the topics that we plan to discuss is how can we draw more municipal governments more effectively into Clean BC via more funding coming to municipal local governments to do some of this work that we have to do on adaptation and mitigation both. Like we need more money. We're your best bet to meet your Clean BC targets. So that's BCMCLC.
And that gas tax funding model is the one.
It's the one. It seems
Right. Send us the check.
Send us the check, yeah.
What the program, what fits, what doesn't.
Yeah. Oh, and on that though, FCM has, you guys have all probably heard, FCM has got billions more now that they're sitting on. They're really scaling up. They're looking for projects.
GMF fund?
Yeah, GMF is looking for projects. So just a note to staff. You guys already know this, but something that, again, Nelson's well positioned to take advantage of. I had a meeting with them today, and they're still saying the same thing. Like, what do you guys got? That's it.
More
Okay.
food cyclers.
Is that anything from the chamber?
The only thing from the chamber, I was there Wednesday, things that were being bandied around. Anyway, I think the biggest thing is that the artisans market they're hosting on Saturdays there. I think they had 5 vendors Saturday, but Tom hopes that in time more will sign on. They would like to have 10 to 12 lined up along there. It puts it in a good position, location to work with the farmers market. I understand that one was very successful. The busiest one yet this past Saturday. And what was the other thing that was floating around? I don't know if you heard or not, but right now in our part of the world, Nelson, Kootenay Lake, but occupancy rates are running 70 to 100%.
Yeah, that's one of the key economic indicators.
Yeah,
Your
so it's
occupancy
strong.
rates.
You just can't pull a corner.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Any other council reports?
I can do my.
Councillor Anderson.
Oh, excuse me. I can do my council report for the RDCK. So with the rec facilities, they're looking at like a stepped reopening. It will have to be within the budget. Currently, there's a small surplus. And when they start, it will be in the fitness center. It'll be reduced operating hours and reduced programming. There is some fitness happening outside. With fitness, you'll be booking a time, basically getting your sanitation bottle, going in for, I think like it's an hour and 15 minutes. Everything gets cleaned afterwards, and then you leave. And I think it's going to be at a higher rate, I believe, like around $10. So that's going to be a difference in our rec facilities. And it was noted that they had been really supportive with the vulnerable populations. Another interesting thing that came out of their development services was the First Nations relationship and partnership. So Sangita gave us a report on that and looking at undertaking meaningful consultation. And they're starting with the Yakanuki and the Kootenay Band. And so some great work. They're also going to be looking at how to engage with the Siniacs and the Salix as different projects come up and they're moving forward. One of the projects is the park redevelopment plan. Or not redevelopment, sorry. It's the Park Trails Waterfront Access Master Plan. And so that's something that will be coming, the start of that will be coming. And so they're before it goes out, they're engaging First Nations with that. So they're trying to always make sure that they're engaging with First Nations first, which I think is a really good approach. With the recycling, they talked about, the rollout of the new recycling system certainly came with several challenges for staff. There were staffing shortages, the delivery bags and the roll-offs were slower than expected. So the original schedule that they had and what they were promised by their contractor and suppliers, it was happening slower. Waste Management also pulled some of their bins, I think as soon as they were allowed to, but it was because they didn't win the contract, instead of giving the RDCK a little bit more time, they were pulled before anything was there to replace them. Because there was a stage rolled out, there was increased material at open sites, which was really challenging because then some sites had to be closed when they were open, even though their operating hours have decreased. So there's no longer any 24-hour operating sites, and so that material is then going to other sites. So with like Kokanee or Weimar, those are open 24 hours. Now they're open like 7 hours or something like that a week, or 12 hours a week. So then that material is likely coming to the Nelson Groman the recycling station. So that was problematic with them.
One that's puzzling for me on that is, like in Nelson, we are allowed once every 2 weeks at home to do recycling, right? So I just think maybe it's a mindset change that.
Well, I think a lot of people from Nelson, like we saw, like how in that survey with the Foodcycler, they're saying that they're going to the transfer station. I think a lot of people from Nelson also go to the transfer station or the recycling depots for recycling. So we're using it and they're using it.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought, actually, if you go to, like I said, we need to get our people to use curbside. Right?
Yeah, we want our residents to be using our curbside program.
Part of that is increasing the price of garbage.
Yeah.
And I was there the other day, my wife went, the backup truck was full of residential garbage, $6. Completely full of pickup truck.
I mean, it is weighed, but
They're not charging them. Like, I went today with wood and metals and things like that. That definitely comes out. That was $17 for a pickup truck. Metal and a bunch of other things. But until they change that, it's a pricing and it's convenient, right? So.
yeah, no, it's definitely, I mean, I think across North America, we're not properly charging for pollution and the pollution that we're creating. And, you think about the landfills that we have. I don't know, I think the Udashenia landfill, maybe it has 70 years left or something, I can't remember. Maybe it's 100 years, it doesn't really matter. But, we see these things as far into the future and someone else's problem. We really need to take responsibility for the problem that we're creating now. And, there is pushback on increasing the price of garbage. It's, because your grandma used to burn her garbage. Well, grandma only had paper as garbage. And now, the amount of packaging, we live in this throw out culture. And so, we don't properly pay for our landfilling.
And our products are petrochemical in nature. We see that in the fire service continually, how much danger is present for people in a modern home simply because of how flammable everything is, from your plushies to your snuggies to everything that you like.
Plushies
it's all
and your snuggies.
I don't know.
Wow.
It's just like you get all this soft stuff and it's like, oh, that must be a beautiful natural fiber. It's like, no, that's plastic.
Yeah.
That's where that was coming from, so we'll just
And
move
I
on.
was up there today, and you could only drop off cardboard and paper. All the other ones were full of them. I went through the window place, and
Vestibule.
I asked how long, because I didn't see the person up there. How long is this open? She says those are totally different people. We don't do it, which is not a good message.
I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Where you pay for your through the sales.
Through separate crews.
So that
Oh.
they should at least know the hours and what
Yeah.
they take and all those sorts of things. Yeah, that was her comment.
I'll write that down.
They're not us. I don't know when they're open. But
Yeah, and I'll let them know that that's some of the, like, that was your feedback, yeah. And it could have been just they had, I mean, I know that they had severe staffing shortages, and they were having like a hard time trying to hire people for these new positions, and so it, you know, I don't know, you know, if staff there are quite stressed out over this. I know it definitely, this has not been an easy transition. Like, they knew there were going to be bumps, but this was definitely bumpier than they expected, and it's, you know, it is a huge challenge. And then let me just see. Oh, I just wanted to point out that we did get funding through the directors for LED lights at Glacier Gymnastics, which was really great. So I thanked them for that. And there's some other things, but I think that I'll leave. That those are the major things that I wanted to bring up tonight. So, yes.
Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Sure. Why not? It's already 10 o'clock. So I don't really have a report, but I just like to remind everybody, it seems that summer has finally arrived. And so little reminders that come to me as I walk and drive around town and look at things is just remember that the speed limit in the city of Nelson is 40 kilometers an hour, not
Less.
50, 60, or 80. Wearing a bike helmet is the law. We are seeing more and more people riding bikes, more and more groups riding bikes. I think it's really important that people follow the rules, and particularly for adults to be setting good examples. Always find it a bit distressing when I see adults with children. Children have their helmets on and the adults aren't wearing them. A reminder that life jackets do save lives. Having your life jacket tied to your paddleboard probably isn't going to save you or be of much use to you if you get caught in the wake of a speedboat going by. Nelson has gotten busy. We just talked about that in the report from Councillor Renwick. I know our own business that we're still closed because of COVID, but we're getting 3 or 4 phone calls a day looking for whether or not we're open and whether or not we have any availability. So Nelson is busy, so try to remember, as we see the numbers increasing today on the news again, social distancing, washing hands, and wearing a mask helps reduce the spread of COVID. And at the very end, like Bonnie Henry always says, be kind, be calm, and be safe this summer.
We're going to do a big push on that on the recovery side. We're going to talk to the businesses and just hammer that message of, you get an outbreak and you have to close again. It's devastating. You need to do people doing the right thing.
Well, I can tell you as a healthcare worker, I don't want to see us be inundated in our hospital with you know, an increase of cases that come in to the hospital.
No, the best way to stay open and have that economic activity is to step up and do the work and hold the plank and keep doing the work until we're on the other end of that, and that is not a couple weeks away. I want my business to stay open, so does everybody else. And I think I heard.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Jesse.
And on to Councillor Woodward's report. Councillor Woodward, would you give us your council report?
Oh, I just want to add on to what was being said. I have been here the whole time, and it's a long time in a room alone.
Tell me about it.
Hi, in our meeting.
I just want to mention why I'm at home and in this room is we went to Mirror Lake to have a nice family time, and it was absolutely packed, super busy, cheek to jowl people everywhere, and pretty much no rules. It was just and when we got home after that 2.5 days there, that's why we decided to just self-quarantine. So I guess my why I'm mentioning is that this is obviously happening around our province, and it is concerning because it's so wide open all of a sudden. Everyone thinks it's just party time. So I just want to say that from my own personal experience, we could have quite an uptick here, because it seemed to me when we were at Mirror Lake that no one was considering the situation. It was just a free for all.
And do you have a,
Yeah.
thank you, Councillor Woodward. Did you have anything to add about your committee? Have you guys met yet? Or do you have
Yes.
any reports?
Sure. So we had oh, it's quite a feedback here. We had our first farmers market committee meeting. I chaired it, and we had a good mix of people, I thought, on that. Some farmers, some people from the community, and staff, city staff, and the report. There were two motions made. It'll come to council, but essentially the farmers wanted to move back up to most likely the Hall Street Plaza area, and they wanted more artisans included in the mix. So those were the two essential pieces. And other than that, Jordan did say that that the market on Saturday is doing very well, 500 to 600 people a weekend, which is excellent. Wednesday is suffering quite badly, and there are concerns of its survivability. So that's why the members of the committee were saying, can we move it uptown again? So it'll have to be discussed at council, but there were definitely some recommendations that will come to our table. But Jordan is doing an excellent job with, it's a hard situation. She got thrown into the fire on that one. But she's doing her best work, I think, on that, which is great. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see.
So council's made a decision on those, so I guess somebody would have to, that was on the prevailing
Can you hear me?
side.
Yeah.
I was just saying that council's already made a decision on location and artisans, so someone would have to bring that back on the prevailing side.
We didn't, I think artisans wasn't a part of any of our decision.
It was food producers, and that's who it was.
Okay.
Including.
Yeah, that was, Kevin, that was, that was quite clearly made that sorry.
All I'm saying is that's the process. I know there's, and council was pretty clear before COVID that if we were going to have it in the downtown, we had to connect with all those businesses as staff. So that's really where we're at, and I think the question for them isn't, it's traffic, not location. You come up with a solution for traffic with, coming toward, with location in artisans, and is that the only options? I know Diana is working with Tom and Sydney on the artisan side, and they're pushing more information out. Diana's gonna on her contacts, so make sure visitors and travelers know where that is. And I know there's some, if you move it again, are you going to, is that really going to do anything now? People don't know where it is, and so anyway, that's the process. I don't know if you really want to open up that can of worms again. I get from their end they would see that as the solution, but I think there's probably other ways you can drive more traffic without going on that route.
I hear you, and I think that was made clear. And there's also this element of I said it very clearly. We want traffic, but we don't want too much, and we don't want people congregating into a big event. Which is what I witnessed this weekend was a huge kind of event scene, and it was pretty sketchy. So, anyways, but Jordan is she's working on delivering more traffic down there, and she's getting her protocols down, and she's got a good volunteer team. So there's a lot of positives going on.
Yeah, no, I hear it. I know Wednesday's not as busy, although last time it was okay, but it's not because it was Canada Day or something.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
10:10.
Okay.
So can we have a motion to adjourn? Renwick,
Wait, are we still going back to in camera?
recess? Well, we've recessed the other meeting. Do we adjourn this or?
No, we adjourn this.
Adjourn this.
Okay, so Renwick and Dooley, all those in favor? Meeting adjourned.
You have much for this closed meeting?
Last,
I'll keep it.
Hang on, wait till
Just let
we're
us
off.
Wait.
We gotta reconvene.